surface. Beyond health and...
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, I'm Alex Marquardt in today for Frederica Whitfield. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this hour with major breaking news. President Joe Biden has just announced that he is dropping out of the 2024 presidential race. In a stunning letter that was just released moments ago by his campaign on X, formerly known as Twitter, Biden wrote, quote, that it has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. He goes on to say that he will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about his decision. Just a stunning announcement from President Joe Biden that he intends to step down as a candidate in the 2024 election. I want to go straight to CNN White House correspondent Priscilla Alvarez, who was traveling with President Biden in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Priscilla, what are you learning?
Alex, this is a remarkable development, and it comes after a morning in which we heard more calls for the president to step down from members of his party, including, for example, Senator Joe Manchin. Now, the president in this letter released only moments ago walks through his accomplishments as president. And also, if I can read you this part, it says, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president." He goes on to say, while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. He goes on to say he plans to speak to the nation later this week. He also thanks Vice President Kamala Harris for, quote, being an extraordinary partner in all of this work. Now, of course, Alex, this comes after that disastrous debate performance by the president in late June. It was after that stoked so much anxiety and panic within the Democratic Party and led to a wave of calls over recent weeks for the president to step aside, to withdraw from this race. And this was something that, despite the president getting back on the campaign trail, despite private conversations with multiple lawmakers, and despite a campaign that up until this point had been maintained, even just yesterday, that he was in this race, it appears that we hit that breaking point. Now, of course, the president has been at his residence here in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. He has been self-isolating because he was diagnosed with COVID earlier in the week. It was that diagnosis that pulled him off of the campaign trail at a pivotal moment. He was in Nevada. He was shoring up support with Black and Latino voters. And it was before one of his last events that he got that positive COVID diagnosis and had to be blitzed back here to the East Coast, to Delaware, where he has since been self-isolating. It has been during that time that he's also been deliberating. He is with his closest advisors and his inner circle in what has been a challenging and at times frustrating time for this campaign. Now, we should also note, Alex, that earlier today on the airwaves, the president's allies were saying that he was in it to win it. Again, this was the resounding message that we were getting from the campaign time and time again. But this letter tells us that the president, upon self-reflection, upon all of the calls from Democratic lawmakers, allies, and donors for him to step aside, has listened to those calls and has decided to not seek re-election in what we really just cannot overstate how remarkable a moment this is. We are on the cusp of the Democratic National Convention. There have been ongoing calls to get that process underway for that virtual roll call. And now so many open-ended questions as to what happens next. We should note Vice President Kamala Harris was at a fundraiser in Massachusetts yesterday, where she too was focused on the vice presidential nominee for the Republicans, J.D. Vance. She was trying to gin up those donor dollars amid some donors deciding not to give money because of all the questions of this campaign. Of course, we'll keep eyes on her. She is in Washington, D.C. today. Many questions moving forward. But one thing has been answered, Alex, and that is that the president will not seek re-election after what has been multiple Democratic lawmakers and allies coming forward to say it was time for him to withdraw. Alex.
Yeah, Priscilla, this was announced by President Biden in a letter from the president addressed to my fellow Americans just 14 minutes ago on his X profile. It's not long, it's just one page. You mentioned Vice President Kamala Harris. He says in the second to last graph that he wants to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all of this work. And let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. Priscilla, you mentioned all the questions. Of course, one of the biggest is going to be, does this automatically mean that Vice President Kamala Harris becomes the nominee of the Democratic Party? Will there be a bit more of a competition to figure out who will be the nominee? Will President Biden endorse his vice president as that nominee? But I just want to get back to this question, Priscilla, of timing. Of course, we have seen the pressure growing from within the Democratic Party. We've seen a growing number, 36 or so Democrats coming forward publicly, lawmakers, to say that they don't believe that President Biden should be running. One of the latest is Senator Joe Manchin. He, of course, is an independent now. He's a longtime Democrat, close to the president. But it was not clear that Biden was going to be making this decision, and it certainly was not clear that he was going to be doing so today. So as of 15 minutes ago, Priscilla, where were we? And how does that make what we now know, this announcement now from President Biden, all the more shocking?
Where we were was that the campaign, his allies, had said he was staying in this race. That is what we were hearing over the course of the morning, including from his campaign co-chairs. But Alex, what everyone told us, what multiple sources told CNN is that this was ultimately the president's decision to make, that he was going to sit with this, that he was going to have those private conversations, including with his family, some of the most pivotal people influential people in his life and pivotal moments. And it was going to be ultimately his decision to make. And that is what I think this letter captures in this moment, is that after that self-reflection, he decided it was not, it didn't make any more sense for him to stick it out and do this re-election. Now, I will say, because you mentioned Vice President Kamala Harris, I had been talking to sources over the last several weeks, and what they all told me is that there was no daylight between the vice president and the president, that she was fiercely behind him, and that she was continuing this campaign as the Biden-Harris ticket. Recall that one of the first things that she said on CNN after that debate performance was that the president should be judged based off his record and not those 90 minutes. And it was that statement that was later used by many of the president's allies, including the First Lady. And so this was the reality for her inner circle as well, was to stay with the president, stay in line with him, and not to flirt with any of the replacement theories that she would be the lead of the party's ticket. Now, of course, this doesn't answer the question as to what happens next, but I do think it's important to know that the vice president, certainly up until this point, has fiercely been behind the president. Now, as far as Democratic lawmakers had some of them had started to gain some consensus about the vice president becoming the nominee if President Joe Biden were to step aside, because of internal polling that suggested that she would fare well against former President Donald Trump, and also because in terms of the process, it might be easiest because she is already part of this campaign apparatus. So Democratic lawmakers, as much as they were calling out publicly for the president to drop out, were quietly also trying to sort out what this process would look like, and again, starting to mobilize behind the vice president. But again, it was unclear if the president was going to withdraw. And so a lot of these conversations have been happening behind the scenes, but how they actually come to fruition, what happens next, is still unclear. And even those who were having the conversations don't have those answers yet. And so certainly the vice president, again, we should note, is in D.C. We'll we'll wait to see if we hear from her today. But this letter from the president, this one-page letter, does not still leaves, I should say, a lot of open-ended questions. But to get to your initial question, Alex, as of a few minutes ago, as of an hour ago, it was certainly the message from the president's top brass that he was going to seek re-election. The only caveat to that over the course of all of these weeks was that it was the president who was going to decide ultimately what he was going to do.
And he has now made that decision in a one-page letter to the American people. Priscilla Alvarez, I want you to stay with us. I'm going to bring in Julie Grace Bruvke from Axios. Julie Grace, first, your reaction to this extraordinary development that the president has decided, after growing pressure in the past few weeks, that he will not be running for re-election.
Now, I don't think many, I've been texting with some members of Congress just now since the news broke, and I don't think anyone expected this news to come today. A lot of people kind of thought it may have come later down the line if Pelosi had publicly spoken out. That being said, Republicans, I think you're going to be hearing a lot of, if he can't serve in 4 months from now, should he be serving now, which I think is going to be the big talking point on their end. And they're also feeling like Kamala Harris is kind of their best odds to run against right now, but also kind of warning they shouldn't measure the curtains too soon and still need to kind of stay focused on the race.
How surprised are you with this timing, considering the fact that not only had Biden and his top aides been saying publicly that they had every intention to continue running, but they'd actually talked about him getting back on the campaign trail after he recovered from COVID? I mean, we've been told by his doctor that he's getting better, but the expectation was that he was going to hold out at least a little longer.
Absolutely. I mean, I spoke with a Biden aide just hours ago that said that he was going to be hitting the campaign trail. They hadn't announced which locations yet, but that was going to be happening, and it felt like they were kind of digging in despite the mounting pressure. So I think there are a lot of people who have been kind of caught off guard by this.
All right, I want to bring in our White House correspondent, Priscilla Alvarez. Priscilla, so much of this discussion was also about where the party elders stood. I'm thinking about President Obama and his wife, of course, the Clintons, and former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. All of them had been fairly quiet on this question in the past few days. In fact, we saw Nancy Pelosi in public last night not saying one way or the other, I would like Biden to leave the race, or notably that she was fully backing Biden and his candidacy. So how did that play out behind the scenes? There was some reporting that President Biden was seething because of Pelosi's position. How much did those party elders play into what we now know is this decision for President Biden not to run for re-election?
Well, certainly as we waited to see what the decision would ultimately be by the president, what was remarkable to watch over the last few weeks was this division among high-profile Democrats, including between President Biden and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Sources had told CNN that the former House Speaker had shared polling with the president and essentially said that he couldn't defeat former President Donald Trump, and that it would have really destroyed the chances of Democrats running in House races. During that private conversation, according to sources, was a moment in which the former House Speaker asked to get the president's senior advisor on the phone to talk through the data. So we know that behind closed doors, these conversations were happening, and the president was feeling quite defensive. He did not believe, or at least he cast doubt over the polling, that he couldn't win against former President Donald Trump. And so this was often the moment that we were in, was seeing these divisions play out. And then also, of course, we should also note that the leaders on Capitol Hill, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, they were taking those caucus concerns to the president. And in some of those meetings, including between Jeffries and Biden, Jeffries did not offer his full endorsement. So as we were watching this unfold, it was clear that the party was quite fractured on this issue of whether or not President Biden should stay in the race. It's also worth noting where we were in terms of money. Of course, donors were among those that were adding their voice to the chorus of calls asking for the president to withdraw from the race. I spoke to sources who said big dollar donors were withholding their checks. There was just so many questions about what was happening next that they didn't feel it was worth putting the money forward because there was no clear answer. Then, too, Democratic strategists were also trying to navigate this as they were trying to get donors to continue to pour money into down ballot races. In fact, just yesterday, we were reporting that the Clintons, former President Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, they were privately urging donors to give money as long as President Biden was the nominee. Essentially, as one source said, they were deferential to the process, if not giving their full-throated support of President Biden. So I note all of these examples to show that there was so much tension and division within the Democratic Party over this issue of whether or not the president had the vigor to go up against former President Donald Trump. And this was also playing out during the Republican National Convention. That was when the campaign really wanted to come in with their counter programming to the former president and his vice presidential nominee. And instead, we're still wrestling and grappling with all of this incoming from Democrats over the course of the week that the president, they just didn't have faith that the president could take on and win against former President Donald Trump. And so certainly it has been a moment, I come back to this, of reflection for the president. Just last week, I was talking to sources on calls with the president when he was reaching out to key groups of lawmakers, and they were telling him directly that he needed to step aside. The polling that they were seeing in their districts was not matching what the campaign was saying, and they felt like the campaign was being dismissive. The president, just a week ago, was still very defensive and said that he had what it took to go up against Trump. And so this has developed over time, and it was in this moment where the president is isolated in his Delaware residence since Wednesday. We haven't seen him since Wednesday. That clearly it allowed this moment of reflection for the president when he was here with his senior advisors to decide on his next steps and to make this announcement on a Sunday afternoon that he's no longer seeking re-election. Now, I should also note, we do anticipate that or at least we were told that the campaign was still planning stops and fundraisers this week and then also in the coming weeks. So we'll see whether that continues all the same. For example, fundraisers expected at the end of the week. Question is, will the president still go to help whoever is going to now be the candidate and nominee? But it just really speaks to how over the course of all this time, we saw the different stages of a campaign and a president going through, wrestling through these calls from Democratic lawmakers to get to this point on a Saturday, only weeks away from the Democratic National Convention, for him to essentially say, enough is enough. He's going to focus on finishing out his term. So just truly a significant moment in what has already been a quite unprecedented election year, Alex.
Absolutely right. This historic moment coming at 1:46 Eastern time with this letter to the American people from President Joe Biden that he will not be seeking re-election. We're joined now by Jeff Zeleny, CNN's chief national affairs correspondent. Jeff, walk us through what comes next. We're just now a month out from the Democratic National Convention.
It is going to be one of the most extraordinary months in American politics. The Republican convention just ended. Republicans have been planning to run against Joe Biden. Talking to just a few of them as before coming on the air here, there could be legal challenges to this. There are many questions being asked of. But in terms of the Democratic side, talking to two Biden officials, this news was just coming. They were alerted to this just moments before the president sent his letter out. So this is still being digested in the party. The first question is, will he, when he addresses the nation later this week, which one official says could be on Tuesday, possibly on Wednesday, depending on his COVID diagnosis and depending how the week plays out, does he extend his endorsement or support for Vice President Harris? That, I'm told, is unclear to Biden officials. If he does, it's certainly up to the delegates, because delegates have the decision here. But what we know, the time frame of this is the delegates will be voting beginning August 1st through August 7th. So this is an extraordinary moment here that we will certainly hear more from the president this week.
All right, Jeff, stay with us. We're going to go back to Priscilla Alvarez, who is traveling with the president at Rehoboth Beach. Priscilla, there is news about an endorsement for the vice president.
That's exactly right, Alice. We've been walking through some of the questions we still had. Well, one of them, a very important one, was just answered by the president in this post. He says, "Today I want to offer my full endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it is time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this." So there you have it. The president is putting his support behind his vice president to serve as the nominee of the party and pleading Democrats to come together in this moment. Of course, there have been so many questions about whether the president would offer this endorsement, and whether Democrats would also come behind the vice president in a moment where they could choose someone else. The president is making it clear there has been enough divisions in this party. It's time to come and provide the endorsement of Kamala Harris. And I want to reiterate, because it has been weeks now of these concerns and questions, that over the course of all of this time, the vice president was on the campaign trail, as she has been over the course of the year. And over that time, aides repeatedly told me that she was in line with the president. She was following his direction. As long as he was the candidate and the nominee, she was going to continue on the trail and target the Republican vice presidential nominee that we learned of this week, J.D. Vance. And so this is a moment now where she, according to the president, at least what he wants to see, would now be elevated to be the Democratic nominee. Now, as far as how this works in terms of the campaign apparatus and who takes the wheel from here, I think we still have some questions that we'll be asking our sources about and trying to get more on. But just to come back to this, Alex, the president, after announcing only moments ago that he would no longer seek re-election, is putting his full endorsement behind his vice president, Kamala Harris, and asking Democrats to come together and unite behind her in this moment.
Yep. In another post just after his announcement, again on X, just half an hour later, he says, "My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it's been the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year." Jeff Zeleny, you were just touching on this. Walk us through the mechanics. Now she has the backing of the sitting president to be the Democratic nominee, which would be made official at the convention next month.
It would, and that's extraordinary. I was hedging a bit because that is what the signs looked like, but now we have it official from President Biden. I'm also told by a senior Democratic official that look for other party elders to join in this call to unite the party and reshape the conversation, reframe the conversation to a fight against Donald Trump. So what happens now is, this is the Biden-Harris campaign. She's been part of the campaign. So campaign finance officials that we've been talking to for the last 3 weeks, 3+ weeks, believe that she could inherit the entire campaign. Some Republican election lawyers have argued that she could not. So this could be one of the things that could be litigated in the coming days. But as of now, Vice President Harris has been an integral part of the campaign. She was raising some $2 million just yesterday on Cape Cod. So this contingency plan that has been in the works sort of behind the scenes for a few weeks now will come into place. And what that means that these delegates, the Biden-Harris delegates, will make the decision, and they will still move to formally nominate her likely before the convention. What we don't know, will there be any dissent inside the party? Will anyone else sort of raise their hand and say, no, we also want to challenge her? That's very difficult. Because, again, these delegates are Biden delegates. So if he's sending a signal out there, this is certainly important also. As we reported a couple weeks ago, the contingency planning is such that who would stand in the way of the first black vice president and South Asian American vice president, and certainly the presidential nominee. So we shall see in the coming days here. There is 1 month until the convention, but they are still, I'm told, planning to move to formally nominate her before the convention. But this is uncharted territory. There is no doubt about it. But an extraordinary step here by the president endorsing his vice president.
Julie Grace, obviously, to quell the chaos around Democrats, the easiest path would be for Harris to become the nominee with the full-throated support of those who could potentially challenge her. How do you expect this to play out? When you look at the bench of other Democrats, governors foremost among them, who could also be solid Democratic candidates. Do you expect that there could be a challenge to Kamala Harris?
I mean, I think it's going to be hard for somebody to challenge her with Biden's endorsement, and my guess is we're going to hear from Democratic leaders that are going to come out and follow. That being said, there's still a lot to be seen, and I got to check in with some progressive sources. But I think that on the Republican side, you're going to start hearing a ramped-up calls for 25th Amendment. I think that legal challenges are probably, they're not going to make this easy for Democrats, and they're going to definitely highlight the chaos right now. So still a lot to be seen.
Jeff, speak to that, because there is a growing Republican argument that if he's going to drop out of the race, he should leave the presidency altogether. How can he say that I am not capable or not willing to run for re-election, but I should be president for the next 6 months?
And we are already getting that word in. Elise Stefanik, the House Republican Conference Chair, she says this: if Joe Biden can't run for re-election, he's unable and unfit to serve as president of the United States. He must resign immediately. So these calls will be coming in. This is something that has been telegraphed. What's extraordinary about this is the country and the political parties have had more than 3 weeks to kind of think about these as scenarios, and that is going to be an argument. The White House obviously is going to be pushing back against that by showing that he will do his job, his day job. He's already meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister on Tuesday. That is the schedule. But look, this is going to be an issue. Republicans control the House, as we know very well. They could have hearings, et cetera. But the presidency is still his. But this is going to be a soundtrack of the rest of the campaign. Is he fit to serve for president right now? It may be a distraction, or it could be a rallying cry for Democrats as well. But one thing this does, this injects energy and uncertainty into this pretty stable presidential race up until this period.
Yeah, whether that meeting goes ahead with Netanyahu on Tuesday remains to be seen, but that is a question that is way, way down the list right now. This whole race has been thrown into an extraordinary upheaval, first with the announcement at 1:46 p.m. that he would not be running for re-election. And that was followed then just half an hour later by this endorsement by the president for his vice president, Kamala Harris. I want to bring in Bakari Sellers, who's a CNN political commentator. He's also a former South Carolina state Democratic representative. Bakari, an extraordinary announcement from the president. Do you think he made the right decision?
Well, look, I think that both of the announcements he made today was extraordinary, and I don't want to deal in the past. I think Democrats have been doing that for the past month. I've echoed my disenchantment with Democratic leadership and the way that Joe Biden was treated. I think the first thing that I'll say is that Joe Biden has been one of the most consequential and transformative presidents this country's ever seen. And by stepping aside and doing so today, he continues that mantra of being that transformational candidate. Look, I will tell the viewers a few things. Earlier this week, at the DNC, the Rules Committee actually met and kind of set forth the rules and parameters as we'll go into this convention. And momentarily, the Credentials Committee will meet, and we will have all of our DNC delegates who will be credentialed for the 2024 DNC in Chicago. I think that there will be efforts in place and things in place to help make sure or ensure that the Vice President of the United States is able to drop into this campaign that is already up and running, has cash. I think you're going to see a boost or a boom in donations over the next couple of days. I don't see this open primary that people are dreaming of or warning of, or eliminating the entire ticket. And last but not least, I think it's pretty clear to Elise Stefanik and others, my response and my retort, and I expect the vice president and others to echo the same thing, is that Joe Biden made a clear and conscious decision that he cannot lead the country for the next 4 years. That does not mean that he cannot lead us for the next 4 months. He's been a noble leader up until this point. He will end his administration with a bang and do the work of the people for the next 4 months. But he made the very consequential decision that serving the next 4 years was something out of the realm of possibility for him to do. And he wanted to turn over that to Kamala Harris. And let me just tell you, as a Democrat, I was national co-chair for Kamala Harris for president. We're so damn excited now. My phone's blowing up. It's going crazy. I think that there is a lot of excitement, a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. But at the end of the day, Democrats have Kamala Harris and a long list of others, possible VP individuals taking on J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, and we stand a fair chance.
Bakari, it's more like 6 months, not to quibble with you that he will be president, but I certainly take your point.
I'm thinking about the election. I'm getting my dates confused. I'm sorry.
I totally get it. And we're going to come back to you for more reaction in just a moment. I want to get to CNN anchor Caitlin Collins in New York. Caitlin, you have some exclusive reaction from the former president and Biden's rival in this race, Donald Trump.
Yeah, Alex, I spoke with former President Trump minutes after President Biden tweeted that he is that he is exiting the 2024 race. Obviously, this has been something that the Trump team has been singularly focused on over the last week as those calls for Biden to get out of the race did not dissipate. I was told he was tracking this even from the Republican convention while he was focusing on who was speaking when, his own speech that last Thursday night. He was still tracking these efforts, Alex, and he told me in a quote, and I'm quoting the former president now, he said, referencing Biden, "He is the worst president in the history of our country. He goes down as the single worst president by far in the history of our country." But what I pressed him on, Alex, and obviously what's important here is what this means for him and for his campaign. He told me that he believes that Vice President Harris will be easier to beat than Joe Biden would have been. Obviously, we don't know that she is going to be the nominee. Obviously, Biden has endorsed her, but there is a real question among Democrats over what that's going to look like. And also, I should note that Trump's team has been so worried about this exact situation. They wanted President Biden to stay in this race because they looked at the numbers that we were all looking at, that Democrats were all looking at, and they thought that essentially that he would fare better against President Biden in this race, given that debate performance, given what this looks like. This does, as Jeff said, inject a huge amount of uncertainty in this race. We don't know what it means. It's not clear what it means for the Trump team. They are going to be looking at this closely and following that as well. But it is a notable response from Donald Trump, who now has a big question of who it is he's going to be challenging for the presidency come November.
And Caitlin, game this out for us in terms of what we could expect to see in the coming hours, in terms of responses from those party elders, in terms of the boost in fundraising that Bakari was just talking about, and what the campaign trail is going to be looking like in those next few weeks heading up to the DNC.
I mean, to be frank, we have no idea. The DNC is going to be held 1 month from today. Democrats will be gathering in Chicago, and it's an open question. We've seen Politico reporting Friday night that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, has endorsed this idea privately of an open convention, should that be the case. Now, we don't know if that's actually what we'll see. This is notable when it comes to donors, though, because we had been hearing a lot of reporting from donors who were telling the Biden campaign that they were not going to be offering more money or helping fundraise more money for the Biden campaign until this very situation was figured out, whether or not President Biden was ultimately going to drop out of the race and who would replace him in that situation. And so now that this has happened, I think that it's a big question for donors. I think it's going to be a big question now that Biden has endorsed Harris as the nominee, if that actually happens, who she would pick to be on the ticket with her. I mean, we just finished the vice presidency nomination race with Donald Trump, and now it is an open question of, if it is Harris on the ticket, who she selects to be her vice president and what that would look like. That was also a factor in Donald Trump's selection of his VP. He was kind of watching that closely to see what was going to happen with the Democratic ticket. They wanted to have a good idea of who they would be up against. And now that has completely changed, even though J.D. Vance is now formally his running mate. And so, I mean, this is just a huge mountain of uncertainty for everyone, I think. A question of what this looks like going forward. And if the party does line up behind what President Biden did today by endorsing Harris as the nominee going forward. Clearly, I mean, I think a lot of people didn't believe there was any other option for that because he picked her to be his vice president. So it would be incredibly unusual if he didn't select her to endorse her as the next nominee after he got out of the race. But obviously, you know, this is uncharted territory for anyone, much less the White House. And so it is a major question of what these next few weeks looks like. But it's safe to say this race has completely altered itself since that CNN debate in Atlanta a little over 3 weeks ago. The entire game has changed, Alex.
Yeah, it certainly was the assumption that if he were to step out, he were to drop out of this race, that he would hand things over to Kamala Harris. But it is not, as we've just been discussing, a foregone conclusion that she is necessarily the nominee. That is one of the biggest questions, if not the biggest right now. I want to get back to Priscilla Alvarez, who is traveling with the president. Priscilla, what more are you learning from the White House just moments after the president made this historic announcement?
Well, we're learning a little bit more about what happened in the minutes before the president put out this letter. Sources telling our colleague MJ Lee that the president informed senior campaign and White House team about his decision before the letter went out, saying that he had been reflecting over the last couple days. And of course, this decision was being very closely held. Of course, what the president was doing over the last couple days, in addition to deliberating, was that he was self-isolating. He was diagnosed with COVID earlier last week, and he immediately came here to his residence in Delaware. He got here on Wednesday, has since been behind closed doors, self-isolating. As his doctor had said, his symptoms were improving. And over that time, we are now getting a better picture of what was happening. He was listening to those around him. He was reflecting on what the next steps were, and clearly came to this decision to not seek re-election. And it was in the minutes, again, before putting out this letter that he had notified his senior campaign and White House team. Now, of course, the president, in addition to putting out this letter, has provided his endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris, essentially urging Democrats to get in line behind her. We should note that the vice president this upcoming week had travel plans to go to Milwaukee for events, another sort of attempt at following the Republican National Convention there to provide her counter-programming. The vice president, of course, has spent a lot of the time on the campaign trail really focused on reproductive rights. That has been a line of attack consistently against Republicans, and an assignment that was provided by the campaign fairly early on. Already in January was she out there talking about one of the most galvanizing issues for Democrats and this campaign. So I think you've heard now from everyone that there are so many questions about what happens next. There's so much uncertainty, but the president at least offering a little bit of a notification and some behind the scenes here in terms of how he had been reflecting over the last few days to his senior team. And now we are also getting a deluge of reactions from his allies supporting this decision and moving forward with the party. So again, just to reiterate here, it has now been 24 days from that June debate. 24 days out, this is where we are now. The president deciding not to seek re-election, notifying his senior team only moments before putting out this letter for the entire public to see.
All right, Priscilla, stay with us. Jeff Zeleny, back to you. When do you think we can expect to hear from Kamala Harris? And then the biggest question to her, I think, is going to be, who is her running mate?
That is the central question now. And again, this is not, even though this news is a bit of a shock, the timing of it this afternoon, there have been quiet discussions that have been growing louder over the last 3 weeks. What would she do if? So certainly there are some top potential candidates. She will have the ability to choose her own running mate should she become the nominee. But I'm told just by all the reporting in these last few weeks that she's not likely to wait until she's formally nominated. She is moving forward with this. So the Democratic governors are certainly those who come to mind. Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is such a key state, of course, in all of this. She was down in North Carolina just last week campaigning with their governor, Roy Cooper, who is term limited and he is leaving office. Of course, other governors as well. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker. So it would be hard to imagine that governors would not be at the top of the list or the only list here going forward. But just speaking to another Democratic advisor, as you were on the in the interview with Caitlin there, this senior Democratic official says that people will unite behind Harris, who would run against her. So we will see. This is unfolding on a Sunday. Some people are just getting this information, but it is unlikely that a governor would not be at the center of this list.
To add to your list, Beshear from Kentucky is someone who's been named a lot. Gavin Newsom from California.
Unlikely Gavin Newsom, because he would have the same constitutional issues being a resident of California. And Andy Beshear, absolutely. Some Democrats believe that he would be a good messaging thing. It's going to be who she is comfortable with, but also this is a dramatically different race going forward. It's a tougher race for Democrats. The battleground is already expanding more. So someone from the blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, we shouldn't rule out the possibility of Gretchen Whitmer. That would be certainly history making of its own, 2 women on the ticket. But look, this is someone that is going to be Vice President Harris. Should she become the nominee, this is going to be her first and biggest choice.
And we have heard from Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who posted on X that she was thanking President Joe Biden and said, quote, that her role will remain the same, doing everything I can to elect Democrats and stop Donald Trump. I'd like to go back to Bakari Sellers. Bakari, when you listen to that list of governors that Jeff was just mentioning, is there anyone there who you think says, okay, actually now this is my moment. I would like to challenge Vice President Harris for this? Or do you expect them to largely fall in line and do whatever they can? Because, as we were just discussing, there are only 4 months to go before this election.
No, I don't expect. All of those governors that were named are very talented. I don't have any indication that they are going to run during this short frame. I know that Gretchen Whitmer has already said no. Gavin Newsom, of course, said no and is eliminated from vice presidential conversations because of the constitutional issues. I would want to add 2 more people to Jeff's list of individuals, or maybe 3 more. Admiral McCraven is somebody who I believe Kamala Harris would look at with some keen eye. I would also include Mark Kelly, who is an amazing senator from the great state of Arizona, which is also a swing state, married to Gabby Giffords. We all know his background, his history, a fighter pilot, an astronaut. I think that he brings something to the campaign that would be formidable against a J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. Also in the business world, you have names like Mark Cuban and others who would be bandied about. But I do believe, you will look at Josh Shapiro. You will look at Roy Cooper from the great state of North Carolina. You will look at somebody like an Andy Beshear, but I think that somebody like a Mark Kelly probably would be pushing to the top or near the top of the ticket. But these are all decisions that will be made. I can tell you the first thing that Kamala Harris has to do, something that that work begins right now with the credentials meeting, is as soon as these individuals get their credentials, these delegates, firming up delegates. It's a mini campaign. I think a lot of people come on TV and really don't know the process. But you have to go out there and get these delegates. Many of them are going to be willing to support them. My phone is blowing up with people who are pissed off. And the reason they're pissed off is because they feel like people from on high pushed Joe Biden out the door. And the text that I just got from a friend was like, if they push Joe Biden out the door, what are they going to do with Kamala Harris? They will probably try to push her too. There's a great deal of fear out there. And the people who've done the damage, the Nancy Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumers, those party quote unquote elders and leadership, it would behoove us all if they came out and wrapped their arms around Kamala Harris sooner rather than later, and probably, save those celebratory mimosas for another day, because we have work to do. And so I'm gonna be on the phone tonight calling delegates, getting them, whipping them up, trying to get them on board for Kamala Harris. I don't think that's going to be a difficult task. And anything else the vice president needs to do, I'll be there, because right now Kamala Harris has her work cut out for her. She's running against the oldest nominee for president of the United States in American history. And so when you have this type of change election, when you have this type of generational divide that you have, it's a question of whether or not you want to go backwards with Donald Trump or forward with Kamala Harris. I mean, the man is nearly 80 years old. And so the question is, can he serve another 4 years? I'm not sure he can.
Yeah, that is certainly a concern among Democrats, the backlash, the potential anger for the perception that Joe Biden was pushed out of this race. I want to go back to CNN anchor Caitlin Collins in New York, who's going to pick up our coverage. Caitlin.
Yeah, Alex, of course, this is changing by the moment now as we are closely following this breaking news this hour. And just to get everyone up to speed, President Biden has announced in a letter that was posted online a short time ago that he is exiting the 2024 race. He followed up by saying that he is endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris, to be the Democratic nominee. But this has thrown a lot of uncertainty into this race. It is a complicated process to replace the nominee, and that is a major question of what will happen next. There are a lot of phone calls happening behind the scenes right now from all of our sources, from top Democrats who are asking themselves that very question of what happens next. I want to bring in Ron Brownstein, CNN's senior political analyst, who had written a lot about this dynamic that was facing Democrats, Ron. And this, you just wrote in The Atlantic a few days ago talking about how you believed keeping Biden on the ticket was forcing Democrats to drift toward disaster. What do you make of this decision now that the president has come to as he has been sequestered away in Rehoboth Beach dealing with COVID-19? We just got an update from his doctor this morning, and then this letter dropping this afternoon.
You know, Caitlin, the famous economist Herb Stein had a dictum that, any trend that can't be sustained won't be. And somewhere in the beyond, Herb Stein is being validated again. I mean, the situation had become untenable since the debate. There was no way that Americans could unsee what they saw, which was evidence of, that caused concern about whether Biden was up to doing the job for another 4 years. It wasn't only the question of whether he could beat Trump. It was the question about whether he could do the job for another 4 years. And that consensus spread in sort of concentric circles in the Democratic Party, starting with donors and strategists, moving out to more and more elected officials. And then in the most recent polls, a majority of the voters as well. And so, as I tweeted, what would it mean to be the Democratic nominee if the Democratic congressional leadership, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, a majority of the voters, a majority of the donors thought you shouldn't? I think Democrats understand that this is a difficult and risky situation to switch from Biden at this point, but it kind of inverts the saying that he often used: "Don't compare me to the Almighty, compare me to the alternative." The Democrats who understand this is a uncertain proposition felt that it was a certainty that Biden was not going to get over the top in the states that he needed, and thus jumping out of the speeding car as it headed toward the cliff was a better bet than staying in the car as it went over the cliff.
Yeah, but the question now is, if you've stopped that car from where you thought it was headed, Ron, I do think it's an open question of what happens now. I mean, do you expect Democrats to rally behind Vice President Harris, or do you expect it to be a situation where obviously Biden has the power to release his delegates that we're going to be voting to affirm him as the nominee 1 month from now in Chicago? What does that look like over the next few days?
Well, first of all, technically, he doesn't even have to release them. The Democrats changed their rules in the 80s. You are not obligated as a Democratic delegate to vote even on the first ballot for the person that you are pledged to. If there's kind of a conscience exemption, so they could have done whatever they wanted, from the outset. The way I felt about this really since the morning after the debate was a question of demand side and supply side. I mean, I think there is a demand side desire for an alternative to Harris, because there are certainly Democrats, both professional strategists, campaign managers, and regular Democratic voters who worry whether she can beat Trump. But I don't think there's going to be a real supply side alternative offered here. I don't think any of the candidates who a significant number of Democrats would consider a better bet would actually run against her. Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer, who I would put at the top of that list, have already said they won't. I don't think after this enormous internal tension over nudging Biden aside, there's going to be the stomach for climbing another mountain of nudging her aside. And I've been talking to people the last couple of days about what the quote Kamala coalition could look like. And, she has the potential to help in areas where Biden has been the weakest: younger voters, non-white voters. The question is whether she can maintain where he has been the strongest, which is unexpectedly sustaining his support among white voters very close to his 2020 levels, despite his overall problems. So I think there will actually be pretty quick rallying around her. And if someone runs, I doubt it will be someone who most Democrats would consider a true, full-fledged, top-tier alternative.
Yeah, we had seen the polling that showed her doing well against Trump in a head-to-head matchup. Of course, it's a question now, if that becomes the reality, what those numbers look like. Ron Brownstein, stand by. I want to go to CNN's Priscilla Alvarez, who covers the White House for us, who has been tracking all of this as President Biden is in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Priscilla, what is the latest you're hearing from White House officials and Democratic sources on their reaction to this breaking news?
Well, certainly they are surprised. The president, only moments before putting out this letter, had advised his senior teams that he had made this decision. He had been reflecting on it over the last couple of days. This was a decision, of course, that had been closely held, and one made, Caitlin, while he was behind closed doors at his Delaware residence, where he has been self-isolating after testing positive for COVID last week. Now, Caitlin, what I am learning now is that I'm getting text messages from sources who say donors, big dollar donors, are now abruptly, suddenly reaching out again to advisors to say they want to donate. This, of course, had been one of the challenges for the Biden campaign over the last several weeks. While fundraising had mostly been a bright spot for the Biden campaign since the president announced his reelection bid last year, we had seen in recent weeks that some big dollar donors were starting to hold back their checks over concerns and questions about President Joe Biden's candidacy. This had also started to become an issue for Democratic strategists who were trying to ensure that that money was still at the very least pouring in to down ballot races. Now that this decision has been made by President Joe Biden not to seek re-election, I am hearing from sources who say that these big dollar donors are coming back in droves now, wanting to give money. We also have reporting from our colleague Kayla, who notes that multiple donors had also reached out to the vice president's team leading up to this decision, saying essentially that they were willing to support her if she were at the top of the ticket. Of course, money is important for any campaign. So what this signals at this point, still early, is that the donors are willing to give to this campaign, knowing now that the president will not be at the top of the ticket. We should also note that the campaign is often boasted about their grassroots fundraising numbers after multiple events. So we'll see, too, whether they see a similar boost from those grassroots donors toward the campaign. But Caitlin, certainly a remarkable moment, not only with Democratic lawmakers who are starting to show some openness, or at the very least some relief, I should say, that the president is deciding to withdraw from this race, but also from the donors who up until this point were holding back that money just because there have been so many questions about his viability as a candidate. Now, of course, White House teams are learning about this as we have been on air. White House officials are in a call about this decision now and what this means moving forward. But certainly everyone absorbing this news as the president, again, had closely held this decision, made it over the last couple days, and then notified his senior teams only moments before putting out that letter. Now, the president did say in this letter that he will address the nation later this week. We don't know when that will be just yet, but he himself has acknowledged that he will also be addressing the American public over this decision to not seek re-election.
Yeah, and he has meetings with world leaders this week. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, on Tuesday. We'll wait to see what all that looks like. Priscilla, I'll let you keep checking in with your sources. Let us know if you hear anything new from White House officials. I want to go to Jeff Zeleny, CNN's chief national affairs correspondent, because, Jeff, this creates a huge amount of uncertainty for the person who thought he was challenging Joe Biden on this ticket, Donald Trump, who I should note is already sending out fundraising emails talking about keeping their foot on the pedal as they are looking at all of this and this new dynamic that the Trump campaign finds themselves in.
Caitlin, it absolutely does. And really, we can throw out any of the polling that has been done up until this point. Yes, the record of Vice President Harris will be front and center in this. Of course, she still owns the accomplishments and also the controversial aspects of the Biden-Harris administration. But until she becomes the nominee, if she does, as Ron was saying, we should leave open the possibility for something else happening. I mean, I think none of us would have sort of projected this happening already. So let's leave our minds open to this historic making campaign. However, the Trump campaign clearly is going to be focusing immediately on Vice President Harris. But we know the battleground states that have already been playing out, but a couple questions here. Does her candidacy, should she be the nominee, make some states more competitive, like a Georgia, for example, like a North Carolina? Does it make other states less competitive? So what we know about this campaign, what we've been talking about, how it's, 6 or 7 states, that is not necessarily where this is going to stand perhaps a month from now. But there is no doubt that this is going to upend sort of all of the assumptions here. And as you were talking with Priscilla there, I was speaking with one other senior Biden official. And let me bring this news to you, Caitlin. President Biden's decision, I'm told, to leave the race was reached within the last 48 hours or so, a senior advisor explains to me as he was consulting family members and top advisors. He did not have a single final meeting in Rehoboth, Delaware, where he has been spending the weekend, I'm told, but he was in conversation with them. But an advisor says the president, quote, was not dug in, but he was studying all of this data coming in, and he became convinced that he would, quote, weigh down the ticket and potentially be a distraction and complication for defeating Donald Trump in November. So, of course, for the last 3+ weeks. He has heard the call from so many. But Caitlin, it became even louder than we know. A lot of the Democratic office holders and officials, the senators and House members, came out and said he should step aside. That was largely for their own political purposes at home. They were in tough races. But it was the information, the data, I'm told, presenting him with the fact that he was suddenly potentially losing states like a Minnesota, like a New Hampshire. So the battleground map so big, it changed the state of the race here. So history will judge this period as one more Joe Biden decision that took a while to get there. As you know from covering the White House, we covered it alongside. President Biden is often very deliberate. Some Democrats believe too slow in making a decision in this fast-moving world now. But by deciding on this Sunday, Democrats still believe they have time to reset the campaign. We shall see.
Yeah, I mean, you can't overstate the enormity of a decision like this. This is something that we talked to Bill de Blasio about this on Friday night, and he was saying, he was in the presidential race not very long when he was running for the Democratic nomination, but he was talking about how even for him, how much it weighed on him to make a decision like that, to get out of the race. And he was saying what President Biden had in front of him was 10 times that he's
Right.
looking at this race, and what a personal decision this is to completely reshape your legacy by making a decision as enormous as this one. And it's interesting that your reporting is that he came to this within the last 48 hours because he got that positive COVID diagnosis last week when he was out in Nevada and had that time to where he was self-isolating to really be alone and weigh a decision as enormous as this one.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's so poignant to think that this is the third presidential race that Joe Biden has stepped away from, of course, back in 1988, in 2008, and now. But the circumstances, of course, are totally different, and the stakes are so much higher. And the fact of the matter is, he is a consumer of news. He reads the newspapers, watches television. He's not in, he's sort of physically in a bubble, but is, a modern day president. So he was aware of what was happening, but it was not until, I'm told, really some people who had his best interests at heart, he thought. Yes, he was angry, we've reported, at Nancy Pelosi for speaking so openly and publicly about this, but it's hard to imagine that those comments did not play a role here. I think as we look back on this, a turning point will be when the former House Speaker essentially reopened the door that he had tried to close by saying, "I am running." And he, did not perform much better in those the television interviews that he did sort of in the days after that. So certainly now he will have to defend his decision to remain in the office of presidency. We will see how that plays out. But from here forward, of course, the most urgent question is, does Vice President Harris become the Democratic nominee? We may know that in about 2 weeks' time, Caitlin.
Yeah, and also it's notable, Jeff, just given we did both cover Biden, he made this decision at his Rehoboth Beach, Delaware beach house. It's kind of a place where he would often go to think about big issues. A lot of presidents have used Camp David. Obviously, Rehoboth Beach is often a place of solace for this president. So to make this decision there is also notable. I want to bring in MJ Lee, who is at the White House for us. And MJ, obviously, this decision is landing like a bombshell for a lot of the White House staff who may not have been in that inner circle around Biden to find out about this. What are you hearing from White House officials, but also from Democratic donors that you've been speaking with?
Yeah, Caitlin, I know you know this better than anyone. There's something that a lot of folks who have known President Biden for a long time will often say about the president and his decision-making process. They'll say, he is somebody who can typically take a really long time, sometimes painfully a long time, to deliberate over a really important decision. And then at the end of the day, ultimately, the decision he ends up making is the most obvious one, at least the most obvious one to the people around him. And I think what we saw today and the events and the days leading up to today is precisely that. We have seen the president really think this over for more than 3 weeks now since that CNN debate at the end of June. He has had a barrage of criticism, so many around him, telling him that the right thing to do for the country and for this race in November is for him to get out. It has taken him a long time, at least in the view of so many around him, to get to this point. But at the end of the day, I think this was clearly for the party the obvious choice for him to make. We know this because of a number of really important factors that you need to have behind you if you're going to try to run a winning campaign. We know that the money was drying up. We've been talking about that a lot. Donors were no longer willing to write big checks to support President Biden. The Democratic support was starting to really fall apart. Every day, every hour, we had Democratic elected officials coming out to say that they couldn't get behind the president. The polls obviously were starting to show a real slippage, and including in these key battleground states that really are so critical to the president having any chance of winning and defeating Donald Trump in November. And I think this was always going to be President Biden and the campaign running in full force until the moment that he wasn't. You know, there's no real way for you to run for president 50%. There's no way for you to sort of half be a candidate. And I think that is sort of what we have seen play out, the dynamics that we have seen in the recent days. You know, up until yesterday, we know that the senior-most folks on the Biden campaign were not even talking about the possibility of the president dropping out. We had been told earlier today that some of the most senior advisors in the West Wing were still not talking about the possibility of the president dropping out. And then here we have it, a really closely held decision unveiled by the president himself in a letter that we are told was only given to the top folks in his campaign and at the White House moments before the president decided that he was ready to go public with it. I also just want to take a moment to talk about the importance of the president quickly coming out to fully endorse his vice president, Kamala Harris. You know, there is so much uncertainty right now about how exactly this race is going to unfold in the coming days and weeks. We are obviously in a really unprecedented situation, but it was important for a lot of people in the Democratic Party to hear the words coming straight out of the president's mouth that in his eyes, the person that needs to take the torch from the president is his deputy, is the person that he chose, is the person who he said could take on the role of the presidency on day one. I was just talking to campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond, and he said there's no question about it. This is an example of President Biden doing the right thing, and he said he was really glad to hear the president coming out to publicly endorse Kamala Harris, and that the campaign is going to be behind her, but sort of the machinations of exactly how the campaign is going to sort of transition over to making that sort of the campaign's operation in the coming days. Obviously, all of those things need to get figured out. But look, I think if there was a scenario where the president had delayed endorsing Kamala Harris in any way, that could have created even more chaos and even more confusion. And I think that was clearly a situation that the president wanted to avoid, Caitlin.
Yeah, MJ Lee, obviously a lot of dynamics at play here. Also dynamics not just there at the White House, down the street at Capitol Hill. We have Manu Raju, CNN's chief congressional correspondent, also here with us. And Manu, I know we're getting reaction from the Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries. What is his reaction to this major news from President Biden dropping out of the 2024 race?
Yeah, this just came in praising Joe Biden for his time in office, but also not endorsing Kamala Harris in this statement that he just put out. He called him one of the most accomplished and consequential leaders in American history. He said that in less than one term, he praised him for his work in what he said is rescuing the nation from a once-in-a-century pandemic. He praised his economic leader, and he says he, quote, saved our country by defeating the insurrectionist in chief. He went on to say that America is a better place because of Joe Biden, but no mention of what is next. But I can tell you, Caitlin, in talking to Democrats over the past hour, one, a lot of them are surprised. Some of them did not see this coming, but there is a sense of relief among so many Democrats, particularly ones in difficult re-election races, who were concerned that Joe Biden would essentially drag them down with him, worried that it would effectively undercut their ability to take back the House. But one thing that is also uncertain in my conversation so far, is Kamala Harris the best candidate for them to take back the House, to keep control of the Senate? That is a debate that is still ongoing within the Democratic Party, that is still uncertain about whether or not the party will simply all fall in line behind her, or whether or not they believe there's another candidate who could be better for this, suited for them down ticket. That is something that is still playing out behind the scenes, and perhaps that is one reason why Democratic leaders have not been quick to endorse Kamala Harris the way that Joe Biden has been, because they're trying to assess the impact. They want to talk to their members who are coming back to town tomorrow. But Joe Biden's decision, too, coming on the heels of Congress returning into session tomorrow, where we were expecting even more Democrats to come out, call for him to step aside. 36 had done so publicly. More would do so at the end of the day. But this is a shell-shocked Democratic Party scrambling to figure out what's next. A lot of people are happy about this decision, but what does Kamala Harris mean at the top of the ticket? Will she get the nomination? And what does it mean for the rest of their party? All huge questions that they're still grappling with at this key time, Caitlin.
Yeah, major questions, Manu. And I should note we are now hearing that President Biden and Senator Schumer spoke before President Biden shared the letter announcing online that he was exiting the 2024 race. Manu, thank you for that.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, and thanks very much for joining us. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. We want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. Caitlin Collins is joining us from New York. And I want to begin with the major breaking news we're following right now. President Biden just announced that he's dropping out of the 2024 presidential race and publicly endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic presidential nominee. He made this truly historic announcement in a statement he tweeted out just before 2 p.m. Eastern earlier today. A stunning decision that he kept very close to his vest, alerting his senior White House advisors and campaign staff only moments before making this public letter to the American people public. And we're also just learning, go ahead, Caitlin.
Yeah, well, we're learning about how quickly this decision was made and also how recently. Our Jeff Zeleny is told this decision was one that President Biden came to within the last 48 hours as he consulted his family, his top advisors on the phone while he is still self-isolating from COVID. His statement that he published just a short time ago reads in part, quote, "While it may have been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." We have a team of correspondents covering this entire breaking story. Wolf, I want to start with CNN's Priscilla Alvarez, who is in Delaware with the president where he's been. And Priscilla, obviously, this is major news. Manu just describing a shell-shocked Democratic Party following this news from President Biden. What else are we learning about just how he came to this decision that he resisted for 3 weeks from members of his own party, but now has acquiesced to those calls to get out of the race?
And a shock, too, Caitlin, to White House and campaign officials, though he notified his senior teams right before putting out this letter. This is certainly coming as shocking news to those here that have joined him, as well as across the campaign. Now, the president, as you mentioned, was here and is here in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, at his residence, where he has been self-isolating from that positive COVID diagnosis from last week. Now, it was over this course of time that the president was around his senior advisors, his inner circle, which we had learned had grown even tighter by the day, and he was deliberating. Of course, the president had been hearing from Democratic lawmakers, allies, donors over the course of the last more than 20 days since the presidential debate, calling on him to withdraw from the race. We saw that over the course of the last week and including yesterday. But even so, even as lawmakers were making their call for him to drop out, the campaign was signaling that it was a full steam ahead, that they planned to get him back on the campaign trail and that he was not going anywhere and there was no plan B scenario. That, as of this morning, as the senior campaign brass was saying that the president was in it to win it. And then this afternoon, hearing directly from the president in this letter where he says that he is not going to seek re-election. And he also notes in this letter that he will be addressing the nation himself later this week. Of course, the president still self-isolating here at his residence in Delaware. Now, right after putting out that letter, the president also answering one of the major questions going forward, and that was whether he would put his full weight behind Vice President Kamala Harris, and that is exactly what he did, saying that he endorses the vice president to be the nominee and calling on the Democratic Party to come together. Now, it has been almost about an hour since that news broke, Caitlin. I have been hearing from sources who work closely and advise donors. They say it is an avalanche of money coming in. The same donors that were withholding those big checks because of the questions over the president's candidacy are now pouring in money now that this announcement has been made. Democratic lawmakers also saying that they acknowledge the president's accomplishments and his record, but they are also standing behind him in this decision. So this opens up a whole new phase only weeks from the Democratic National Convention, where there are still so many questions about this moment, this uncertain moment, and where we go from here. But the president, in addition to saying that he will not seek re-election, is saying that the vice president, or that he endorses the vice president. We should note on the vice president, her schedule today was to be in Washington, D.C. I have reached out to her staff to see where she is now, as well as whether she has spoken to the president. She was in Massachusetts just yesterday speaking to donors at a fundraiser. Also, she has been completely behind the president in this moment. Aides I have spoken to over the last several weeks consistently told me there was no daylight between the two. Now, of course, we'll see what happens from here. But our colleague John King is reporting that the vice president does intend to lay low publicly until the president speaks to the nation. She has a couple campaign stops on her calendar this week. We'll see if she'll move forward from that. But Caitlin, just to go back here, the president really making a stunning announcement today and saying he is not seeking re-election, saying that he is endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris, and all of this coming together in the last couple days while he was self-isolating at his residence here in Delaware. Sources often told us that it was going to be the president that made this decision. That's exactly what he did. Caitlin?
Yeah, clearly a period of self-reflection. Priscilla Alvarez, thank you for that. And Wolf Blitzer, I mean, you're just joining us now on this breaking news. Wolf, you obviously covered the White House for a very long time. You've covered multiple presidents. I just wonder what you make of this pretty stunning news, even despite the fact that it was kind of a drumbeat building within his own party for 3 weeks. But still, the stunning news to see a sitting president step down from running for re-election.
And the way that the president made this announcement in a public statement that he posted on social media, as opposed to directly addressing the American public. If Priscilla Alvarez is still there, I have a couple questions for her. Priscilla, has the White House or the White House physician or anyone at the White House updated us on the president's condition? We know he's self-isolating from COVID in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware right now at his home there. How is he doing?
Yeah, Wolf, we actually received a letter from the White House doctor earlier today, and he said that the president's condition, his symptoms were improving, quote, significantly. We have been hearing from the doctor routinely since the president was diagnosed with COVID. And yesterday, the doctor said that his symptoms were improving and that he was progressing. Today, using the term significantly to describe how the president was feeling in terms of his symptoms, apparently being more mild than the president himself feeling better. So the White House doctor, again, has been updating us, did so before we received this letter today to say the president is feeling better. Of course, the president has also been taking Paxlovid and took another dose of that today, but he has still been self-isolating over all this time. And since he arrived here in Delaware on Wednesday, we have not seen him since then. So we are still waiting for guidance on what his schedule looks like this week. Of course, the Israeli Prime Minister's office saying that the two are expected to meet on Tuesday. We have not received White House confirmation of that meeting, but it was going to be a busy week ahead for the president, and he appeared to be on track to be better, to meet those commitments. But we're still waiting to get that updated guidance from the White House as to when the president will be coming out of that self-isolation, Wolf.
We hope he has a speedy recovery from COVID. Another important development, normally under these circumstances, you would think the president immediately would go on television and announce to the American people what's going on. And now the White House is saying in this public letter that the president has posted on social media that he'll do it later in the week. Is that the result of COVID, that he's still suffering, that maybe his voice is not that strong yet? Has the White House explained why he's going to go on television later in the week as opposed to tonight?
We are asking those questions, Wolf, to try to get more clarity as to when exactly he's referring to in this letter when he says later in the week. There is nothing in this White House note from his doctor that suggests that his symptoms aren't improving enough to address the nation. But again, he is here in his residence in Delaware. So it's unclear, too, where he would like to make those remarks when he addresses the public about not seeking re-election. So we are reporting, we're working our sources to try to get more information. Well, we also can't sort of overstate here how stunning a news this was this weekend to get this letter here around 2 in the afternoon. So there are still a lot of pieces being put together here, but we do know that the president wants to address the nation from the letter that he put out. And so we are trying again to get more clarity as to when that will be and why not tonight. But we do know that he is recovering. He's recovering well. I think the outstanding question here is where he wants to make those remarks from, because right now he is self-isolating at his residence here in Delaware.
And we, of course, hope he has a speedy recovery from this latest bout of COVID. Priscilla Alvarez on the scene for us in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where the president is recuperating his latest bout of COVID. Hope he has a speedy recovery. I want to bring in Jeff Zeleny right now. Jeff, am I the only one surprised that he's not addressing the American public tonight as opposed to later in the week? And do you suspect it's related to his bout with COVID?
I think that could be it. I mean, he is at his home in Rehoboth, Delaware. Certainly, as you know, Wolf, presidents can always have access to a live television camera. He could simply go downtown Rehoboth with a mask on. He could do that. But I think that he wanted to deliver this news himself, and I'm not sure what the harm is in waiting for him to return to the White House to address the nation. This is, I guess, one more example of how information is disseminated these days. But they did want to keep this closely held. Staff only learned about this, we're told, just moments before it was sent out. He wanted to control what has to be certainly the most difficult political decision he has ever made. But we are getting new information in from the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Jamie Harrison, who is saying that the work we must do now is unprecedented, but the party will undertake a transparent and orderly process to move forward. So what that means is that they are going to follow the rules, not get right behind Vice President Harris as the president has done. But I'm also learning behind the scenes really for the last week, no one was in Harris's world. Her supporters were trying to push the president out. But in the case he did make a decision, there's been a lot of whipping going on. And by that I mean making phone calls to delegates and try and line up the support for her. So that is happening even with more speed now this afternoon. But look, everyone is not going to come out and support her, but another Democrat official said, who is going to stand up and block her? So it looks like this would be moving that direction, but we shall see. No one would have predicted this just a month or so ago.
Yeah, it's a dramatic development, history unfolding, Manu. And as someone who spent 7 years as a White House correspondent, I know that if the White House and the president wanted to address the American public from Rehoboth Beach tonight, whether at his home or someplace else, he could have easily organized that. The White House media pool, which is always on the scene, ready to go, they could have set that up very, very quickly.
Yeah, perhaps there's something to do with his recovering from COVID. He wants to do it in a more presidential setting, maybe from the Oval Office, not necessarily from Rehoboth Beach. Perhaps it's all part of the calculation about how he wants to deliver a message that will go down in American history. I mean, when Lyndon B. Johnson, of course, decided not to run for re-election, that statement that he made is still, of course, being played today. That was such a historic message. This one will be remembered in the psyche of the American public. The big question is, where does this campaign go from here? How do the two parties realign their strategies going forward? Republicans, too, they are scrambling to try to figure out how to go about dealing with the fact that Kamala Harris may be at the top of the ticket. I talked to a number of Republicans in the run-up to this, expecting that perhaps this could happen. They were uncertain. What exactly do they say? Do they go after her political views. They tried to tag her to Joe Biden. They say she covered up for Joe Biden's mental challenges and mental acuity, his cognitive ability. Will that be part of it? And also, Wolf, lawsuits. How Republicans are signaling that they may try to fight this and try to prevent her state by state from getting onto certain ballots. Perhaps they can have some favorable rulings, can make it harder for Democrats going forward. All part of what is uncharted territory as a party try to assess what's next.
All right, hold on for a second.
I just want to say we have a statement from former President Bill Clinton and he is supporting Vice President Kamala Harris. This is a significant development here. We have not yet heard from some of the other presidents, but he's saying this in a statement. Now is the time to support Kamala Harris and fight with everything we've got to elect her. America's future depends on it. So you can imagine the weight something like that would have on these delegates.
Yeah, very significant development indeed. MJ Lee, our senior White House correspondent, is over at the White House right now. What are you learning, MJ?
Well, Wolf, we are obviously hearing from a lot of national Democrats since the president announced that he is dropping out, calling him a patriot, saying that he ultimately made the right decision and the decision that was right for the country. Put right and wrong aside for a second, Wolf. I think what became clear to the president and probably a few of the people around him really involved in making this decision was that ultimately he didn't really have a choice. We saw everything around him really crumbling at such a stunning pace over the last few weeks. Whether it is the money drying up and donors saying that they were not willing to give to the president anymore, whether it was the growing chorus of Democratic elected officials saying that the president needs to go, whether it is the slipping in the polls that we have seen consistently over the last week or so, where not just in the national polls, but in the very battleground states that will be so important in determining whether President Biden could defeat Donald Trump. And the problem here was that in all of those major factors, there was every indication that in all of those things, they were all headed, continuing to head in the wrong direction. This didn't seem like a situation where you give it a couple more days and the situation improve. And that really was what the president was contending with. One source that I was talking to, just in terms of how closely held this decision was, I'm told that he let the staff know at around 1:45, and this is his most senior, most members of the team. And, the tweet that he sent out, that his account sent out with the letter announcing that he was going to be dropping out, went out around 1:46. So clearly the decision was made, and this wasn't the president discussing whether to do this or not with his senior most staff. This was him informing his staff that the decision was made. I also just want to note, in the letter that he sent, he said he is going to focus the rest of his term on making sure that he is finishing out the rest of the first term as well as he can, and really focusing on really just doing the duties of the presidency. What he didn't say there, of course, is the role that he potentially now has to play in supporting his vice president, Kamala Harris, who he endorsed. He now is potentially the biggest surrogate that Kamala Harris could have out on the campaign trail. And this kind of support obviously could come in a lot of different ways. As you were discussing before, the president did say that he is going to be addressing the nation about this decision later in the week. We don't know exactly when, but we expect that he is going to address that decision to endorse Kamala Harris as vice president as the next person that he is going to pass the torch to. The one other final thing I will just note, this might be for a lot of Democrats sort of the president finally making the right decision. There is also a lot of anger, a lot of bad blood, a lot of hard feelings about the way all of this was handled by various Democrats in the party. I was on the phone with campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond, and he unleashed some really harsh words on the donors that in recent days had refused to give to President Biden. And he said that what the donors had done was create a self-fulfilling prophecy, because essentially when the money dries up, there is no way that you can win. And he was saying, look, the donors basically ensured that this was a no-win situation for the president. He said the donors now better pony up, and we are actually seeing the first signs of donors actually turning around and saying, yeah, now that he has decided to step down, we are going to continue supporting this ticket. Wolf.
Dramatic developments indeed, and historic developments we're watching very, very closely right now. MJ Lee at the White House. We'll get back to you. We'll get back to our panel shortly. I want to go to Caitlin Collins, who's also covering all of this for us. Caitlin, these are dramatic developments, and it's come as a surprise to a lot of us after the President of the United States for days and days kept saying he's in it to win it. He's not going anywhere. He's staying in the race. Then all of a sudden, he posts this letter to the American public saying he's no longer going to run.
Yeah, and of course, Wolf, he is recovering from COVID-19 and still experiencing symptoms, though his doctor said in an update just this morning, I read the letter this morning at about 9 a.m., that he is recovering and those symptoms had improved significantly. So that could also play a factor in how we are learning this dramatic breaking news from the president himself in a letter that was posted online announcing he is not going to seek the election and the Democratic nomination for this November to challenge Donald Trump for the presidency. Jamal Simmons is here with us. He is a CNN political commentator, but also, and more importantly in this moment, the former communications director for Vice President Harris. And Jamal, I want to talk to you about the Harris dynamic of this because Senator Mark Warner of Virginia has just lined up behind her. We're watching closely to see what Democrats are saying about this. But first, you worked inside the Biden White House. What's your reaction to this news from the president?
You know, it's an incredible amount of, we kind of thought this was coming, but gosh, it's still so sad, right? I mean, Joe Biden is this American hero. He's such a patriot. He's somebody who saved us from Donald Trump 4 years ago, if you're a Democrat. And so to see him have such a successful political career, a successful presidency, but Father Time is unforgiving. And over time, it became clear that this probably wasn't going to be able to work. So for those of us who were inside, and I think Democrats I've heard from in the last hour or so, there's an incredible amount of excitement about the future, yet sadness about Joe Biden and losing him as a political leader.
Yeah, and of course, all the calls for him to drop out had been talking about what it would mean for his legacy. That's what Colorado Senator Bennett said to me when he was saying essentially that he did not believe Biden could defeat Donald Trump if he remained on the ticket. But with Biden's statement about 20 minutes after he posted this letter saying that he is going to endorse Vice President Harris as the Democratic nominee, we're watching these statements. We're seeing people like Senator Mark Warner, progressive House member Jamal Bowman getting behind her as the Democratic nominee. Is that what you expect to see from the Democratic Party, or is this going to kind of become this complicated contest where you are seeing other Democrats throw their hat in the ring for this nomination?
No, for about 10 days or so, I've been hearing about this movement, particularly of moderate senators, people who are on the line in the upcoming states, a lot of donors who frankly weren't big Kamala Harris fans, a year ago, who've been calling around saying, listen, if this works out and she's the nominee, we will move over. I would expect I call them the super friends, right? You'll start to see more of the super friends come together. And by that, I mean, we've already seen a statement from President Bill Clinton from what I just heard on air. I think you may hear from President Barack Obama. You may hear from some of the other big luminary names in the Democratic Party who will come out and say Kamala Harris is the person. Here's the reason why, Caitlin, is because we just don't have a lot of time. We keep saying it's 4 months, but it's not really 4 months. We're about 2 months away from the convention. Once we get to the convention, we're less than 3 months to Election Day. And so when you think about that, literally, you've got so much to do. I don't know that anybody's working on a logo, right? You need a Kamala Harris logo for the yard signs. Somebody's got to print those signs. They've got to ship them out to all the states. You've got to make sure that there are going to be what staffing changes are going to occur inside the campaign. And we don't know what that might look like. She's going to also need to, again, obviously have a new travel schedule, and everything is going to change. And so you've got to figure out how do you make that work in a very short amount of time. And I'm hearing people talking about that, but it's more than a notion.
Yeah, and we've gotten a statement from the Clintons as well, both Clintons, Bill and Hillary, getting behind Harris for this nomination. Talk about those big names that are coming out. Everyone's going to be watching this closely. Jamal, I want you to stand by because I want more on your thoughts on this, but we are getting new reporting about conversations between President Biden and Vice President Harris. I want to go back to CNN's Priscilla Alvarez, who is covering all of this from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Priscilla, what are you learning?
Caitlin, I'm told by a source that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris spoke today. It's unclear exactly at what time they spoke. Remember, the president put out his letter publicly that he would not seek re-election earlier this afternoon. But the president made clear after that letter that he was putting all of his support behind Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic nominee, and also calling on the party to come together. Now, the vice president was on the trail yesterday. She was at a fundraiser in Massachusetts, where, again, she was defending the administration's record and also trying to underscore the stakes of the election. It was a fundraiser that brought in more than $2 million. Today, however, she was back in Washington, D.C. at her residence and with her staff. So this latest reporting is that the president and the vice president have spoken. That, according to a source who I spoke with, we're still trying to get more information as to what that conversation looked like and when exactly it happened, but significant all the same.
Yeah, of course, and also fascinating to learn about these conversations that he was having. Obviously, you expect him to speak with the vice president about this. Priscilla, keep us updated on what you're learning about this. We also have Van Jones joining us. He is CNN's senior political commentator and a former Obama administration official. And Van, obviously, you and I were talking a lot about this dynamic and how this was ultimately going to play out when we were covering the Republican convention in Milwaukee last week. And with this news, this entire campaign has just upended itself.
Yeah, there's a lot of political stuff. The Democratic Party is a family. At the end of the day, this is a family matter. You know, Joe Biden's body may not be as strong as it used to be. His language skills may not be as sharp as they used to be. His heart is as big as ever. His heart is as big and as true and as strong. And this is the difference between a politician and a leader. He made a selfless decision, and people are heartbroken. Even people who are pushing for this to happen. It's kind of like when your grandpa, you got to take the keys, and everybody, you got to take his keys, you got to take his keys, you got to, and he's fighting and he's fighting, and everybody's so frustrated, and then you finally get the keys back, and then you just cry, because this is somebody that you love, this is somebody that you care about, this is somebody who was there for you, this is somebody you wouldn't be here without him, and you have to take something from him. Now, this is not, look, politics is politics, but this is a human moment for one of the great humans in America. This is a huge moment for him, for his family, for all of us who love him, for all of us who wanted him to get across the finish line. But if you're a young person watching this, this is leadership. This is patriotism. This is what it means to put the country first and put the party first and put the cause first. When your arm gets tired, you let somebody else finish pitching the game. That's what Joe Biden has done, and he's done that for all of us. And so I just want to say, I don't know who's going to be the VP, the non-VP. I don't know anything about politics. I just know that I love this man. I care about this man. It was painful every day to sit up here and talk about him like he's just some problem for the party. Wait till we get to the convention. You're going to see people crying, standing, screaming, cheering. He may not get a chance to talk for 10 minutes. We finally get a chance to put our arm around this guy. He did the right thing for this country. He did the right thing for this party. All of us are going to be in this situation someday, and I hope that we take a moment to honor this man and to love this man. I love Joe Biden. I appreciate what he's done, and a lot of people are heartbroken today. Even if it's the right thing, it's still just horrible.
Well, and Van, I mean, on that point, which is a great point that I think resonates with a lot of people, of the personal nature of a decision like this. We often talk about things in a harsh political lens of who's going to fare better, what this looks like. I mean, I also have to imagine what it's been like the last 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks since that debate, to see, what the reporting has been behind the scenes of Democrats who wanted him to get out. On Friday night, the reporting was that he was seething over, seeing big allies of Pelosi come out and call on him to get out, even upset to a degree with his former running mate, President Obama. And just to see, what he personally has witnessed in these calls from his longtime allies, people who certainly praise his legacy, but said, it's time for this decision to be made.
But have we all gone through this with our own family members? Like, yeah, he's hurt, he's pissed. A lot of us wouldn't have careers. I wouldn't have a career without Joe Biden. Joe Biden picked me out of the puppy pile. He's the person that everybody says you work for Barack Obama. No, I worked for Joe Biden when I was in the administration. I was on his middle class task force. All of us have known that embrace. All of us have gotten those phone calls and those cards when bad things have happened to us. So, that's a family. That's what it is. He's hurt now. He feels let down. He feels that his friends turned on him. In the fullness of time, he'll recognize that it was done out of love and as loving a way as possible. But at the end of the day, some people, and I don't want to mention any names and ruin this day, but some people will back their leader no matter what. Some people, they don't care how many people this man has hurt and how many laws he's broken, no matter how many bad things he's done, that's our leader, we're going to back him no matter what. But this party is not like that. This is not a cult. This is a political organization. And we believe in these principles. And if somebody is sick, if somebody can't do it, there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. If somebody can't do it, that's okay. And what you see with a Joe Biden, yeah, everything was falling apart around him, but he could have stuck it out. There were people in this party who wanted him to stick it out. There are people in this party right now who are mad that he didn't stick it out. Don't act like it was all on one side. It wasn't about the donors. It was about, could this man hold together all of us anymore? And when he realized he couldn't, he did the right thing and he passed the baton. That is leadership. Pelosi did the same thing with Hakeem Jeffries. That's leadership. That's responsibility. That's what America's supposed to be about. I love Joe Biden. You have people on both sides of the fight in the party who are crying right now, who can't believe it right now. This is not a normal time, y'all. This isn't just politics. This is a moment in time to honor someone who for 50 years put this country first and sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed. And today, he's sacrificed again. That's Joe Biden. I love Joe Biden. This country should get around Joe Biden and help our president through these last few months.
Jamal Simmons, you worked in that administration as well. I wonder what you make of how Van just laid out what a personal decision this was for President Biden to make after facing these calls for 3 weeks now, sustained calls from his own party. And obviously, you worked with him, you worked with Vice President Harris. I wonder what you make of that.
Yeah, listen, as I started out, it's a very sad day. I have heard both Van's sentiments and feel them, right? I mean, there's nothing I found after the assassination attempt last Saturday, when Joe Biden went on television to tell us what was happening. I know people had different feelings. I felt a little easier about it, right? Knowing that Joe Biden was in charge, because here's somebody who was going to be willing to put the American public first and not just his own political needs, not just do what he thought was best for him. And listen, we can try to make this not about politics, and Van, I'm with you. This is a day for Joe Biden. But on the other side of this coin is a guy who is the antithesis of Joe Biden, right? Who's completely about, Donald Trump is completely about putting himself first. So I think as we think about President Biden, all of us who know him and those of us who worked for him, like Van, really feel an incredible sense of loss. At the same time, this is going to help the Democratic Party finish Joe Biden's job, which is the point of what it was he was running for, which is to keep Donald Trump out of the office and to make America a better place that includes more people and has more opportunity for people. And I think that Kamala Harris is going to do a good job doing that. Let me just say this about her. I worked with her every single day. I met with her every single day. I talked to her on the phone just about every single day when I was there. This is a woman who has great public values. She knows what she's in the game fighting for. She's fighting for people who are being left behind, people who are being left out. She's been a prosecutor her whole life. I think that she is uniquely built for a moment. We've got a candidate who's got 34, felony convictions to go out and prosecute him every day. She's somebody who I think has an incredible ability to go out and inspire people and to get them excited about her. I remember seeing little girls, one of the reasons I went to work for the vice president was because I have a daughter. And I remember thinking that I wanted my daughter to have the same kind of model for her life that my son has when he thinks about Barack Obama. And I remember seeing little girls grab her by the hand and look at her like she's Superwoman, like she's Wonder Woman. I remember seeing older women who many of them didn't agree with her politically. They grab her by the hand and they have tears in their eyes and they'd say, "I never thought I'd see the day that a woman would serve in the White House." Those are the kinds of cases that I think as we go forward in this, what will become the next political campaign, I think we will see the kind of energy that and emotion that we're talking about today. We'll see those out of a lot of Americans.
Well, and Van, I know you said, you wanted to take the moment to reflect on what this means for President Biden, and rightfully so. But there are a lot of people watching, wondering, what happens next here. And everyone is carefully watching every single Democrat's statement on Biden's exit from this race. And you're seeing people like Tim Kaine, Mark Warner, both of the Clintons, Patty Murray, Tina Smith come out and say, not only acknowledge what President Biden just did here, but also get behind Vice President Harris. Do you think, what does that look like for other Democrats and those who may have considered throwing their hat in this race?
Look, there's been a very strong movement behind the scenes to try to line up support for Vice President Harris in case this happened, to make sure that if there was a transition, it would be an orderly one, or at least that there would be a center of gravity that was clear for people. And I think that operation, which was led by people who love Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, I think has been very effective. And so I think that, if you're a swing state governor, if you're, a political rock star of some kind, you're going to look at that wall of support that's consolidated around Kamala Harris. And you're probably going to think, do I want to fight all of that? And so, but however, I think we got to recognize there's still a process here. This is a party that follows the rules. The delegates still have to make the decision. There's a long process by which people are going to have to come to a considered opinion. And I think it's very clear that Vice President Harris has a tremendous amount of support in this party. It's very clear that the operation to make sure that support was visible and in place was effective. And I think, but at the same time, people think because Joe Biden said that's who it should be, that's automatically done. Nope, we are not a cult. This is not a dictatorship. All the delegates still get a chance to weigh in. We still have to go through our process. But right now, she is the overwhelmingly presumptive favorite to inherit this mantle, and that's what Joe Biden wants.
Van Jones, great to hear from you in this moment. Yeah, go ahead, Jamal. Go ahead. I think we lost Jamal's shot. We'll get him back for that final thought to see what he has to say, because obviously this is not just something we are hearing massive reaction from those who have left the White House, those still inside the White House as well, who found out 1 minute before President Biden posted this letter online. Jamal Simmons, Van Jones, thank you both. Wolf, obviously a pivotal moment for this Democratic Party, but also for Republicans as well, who are going to be watching this incredibly closely and with a lot of trepidation about who it is that's going to be replacing Joe Biden on that ticket for November.
And the President of the United States making it clear he wants his Vice President, Kamala Harris, to do exactly that. I want to get reaction to the history that's unfolding right now. Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California is joining us right now. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. What's your reaction to this major decision from the President of the United States?
Today's decision by Joe Biden to not seek re-election shows the difference between a selfless president and in Donald Trump, a selfish person. And I've got a lot of gratitude, Wolf, toward the president for his entire career. He's stepped up, and oftentimes it was reluctantly when he could have devoted his priorities in other directions. His career has been, essentially bookended by tragedy. Elected to the Senate, and then he lost his wife and his daughter, and he found a way to heal his family and help his constituents. And then as he leaves the vice presidency and wants to coast into essentially retirement, he loses his son, Beau, and the country is subjected to Donald Trump, and he stepped up once again. And so my children, they and many others will feed their families from the jobs he created. They'll drive on the roads he built. They'll power their computers and their phones by the chips that he manufactured, and they'll live in a land that are more arable and breathable because of the greenhouse emissions that he cut. So I'm eternally grateful to Joe Biden.
Do you support the Vice President Kamala Harris as the next Democratic presidential nominee, Congressman?
I fully support Kamala Harris. And in fact, she's been trained by the best. Joe Biden was a vice president himself, and so she probably had the best mentor to work under. And she's tough, she's smart, she's real, and she's everything that we need as we go up against somebody who would take away every freedom. Trump's Project 2025 would end abortion, force people into marriages. It would ban books and just be an all-out assault on our freedoms. And this vice president, as I said, she's tough, she's real, she's smart, and she's got what it takes.
We just got a joint statement from Bill and Hillary Clinton, Congressman. Let me read a couple sentences from this statement and get your reaction. We are honored to join the president in endorsing Vice President Harris and will do whatever we can to support her. And then they say, now is the time to support Kamala Harris and fight with everything we've got to elect her. America's future depends on it. Do you anticipate any major challenges to Vice President Harris getting the nomination from other members of your party?
I've seen a ton of other colleagues of mine and leaders weigh in to support Kamala Harris, and I'll let that process play out. But Wolf, I'll just lay it out like this. We can finish the work that Joe Biden has done to restore our democracy and build our economy, or we can turn the greatest country in the world over to a felon, judged, rapist, 6-time bankrupt businessman who sent his friends to violently storm the last office from which he was fired. To me, the choice isn't hard, and it's pretty clear that Kamala Harris would be the best one to inherit that work.
Have you started thinking, Congressman, about who potentially she should choose as her running mate?
Well, we're blessed, as we have seen over the past couple of years, with a number of options and a very deep bench. And so all of us in every way are going to work to support her. But with Kamala, at the top of the ticket and many of the options she has, we can win the House, win the Senate, and win the White House. All of that is in play right now. And I'm just seeing reinvigoration from my constituents, my supporters, and people all over the country. Let's win is the mindset right now.
The Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson is warning that the GOP could file legal challenges over Democrats replacing Biden. Do you think there is any merit to that at all?
If I was faced with Donald Trump as my nominee and potentially Kamala Harris as the other side's, I would probably want to talk about process rather than substance as well. I'm not worried about that at all, Wolf. We've got a convention coming up. We have plenty of time. Again, Americans now have a clear choice as to where we could take this country.
Yeah, the Democratic Convention coming up in about 2 weeks or so in Chicago. We'll all be there for that as well. There's also, as you know, Congressman, less than 4 months until the November election. Do you think that's enough time for Vice President Harris to run a winning campaign and to unite the Democrats?
Yes, and Democrats have been eager, to have, a moment like this and to build off of Joe Biden's successes. And right now, what you're going to see, of course, we're going to honor Joe Biden. And in fact, he's in the Hall of Fame of Democratic presidents. And the best thing that he has done is to prepare Kamala Harris, something that he knows a thing or two about from being prepared by President Obama. So, no, we're ready. On the resources side, we have offices in all of the swing states. And Wolf, I'm being flooded with messages of people who have told me that they're making, contributions and volunteer pledges beyond their reach and means right now because they know what's at stake. And again, Americans know the choice, and we're going to reject a felon, judged, rapist who stormed the Capitol the last time he lost an election in favor for the opportunity that we have ahead. I'm confident in who we are as Americans and the resilience we're going to show in the next 4 months.
Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Eva McKend, our CNN national politics correspondent, is here with us in the CNN newsroom. We're watching all of this dramatically. You've spent the last several weeks covering the vice president, and you've seen her in action. You've gone to a lot of her events. I assume she was given advance notice by the president that this is about to unfold.
Well, what I can tell you, Wolf, is that I have really been listening to key Democratic allies in this moment. I think that what they have to say is really instructive. I'm talking about Black-led voter turnout operations like Black Voters Matter, like Higher Heights. These are the groups that do the key laborious work of door knocking and actually turning out voters, organizing. And I don't think they necessarily felt empowered in the last couple of weeks, because some of these organizers, they didn't think necessarily it was the best strategy for President Biden to step aside. But in the event that he did, and now that he has, they have always said that the Democratic Party must get behind Vice President Harris. LaTosha Brown telling me this afternoon, the bottom line is now that we are ready to go. We are grateful for Biden's service, and that's why we fought with him, for him, until the end. We expect the full Democratic apparatus to now support Vice President Harris, and if they don't, they will lose. And so these are the voices that really should be listened to at this moment, because they are so key to the Democratic coalition. Lots of those black female organizers will be on a phone call tonight.
She's been very active in the last few weeks, out there, very visible on the campaign trail, and she's been raising significant sums of money for the Democratic ticket as well. And you've been there along the way, watching it all unfold. She clearly, I assume, was bracing for this possibility.
Well, she certainly wasn't telegraphing that, though, Wolf. Everyone on her team was really disciplined. She was really on message. She was focusing on reproductive rights. She had events with former Republican women in Michigan, trying to show in that pivotal battleground state that the administration could be one that had mass appeal. There was never any indication that she was really angling for this. You know, those in her orbit really describe it as a delicate dance, because she never wanted to appear, or none of her allies wanted to appear as if they were pushing President Biden out of the way. It was a lot of focus over the last couple of weeks.
And Manu is with us still as well. Manu, now that the president has formally endorsed the Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic presidential nominee, a lot of other Democrats are falling in line.
Yeah, no question about it. We do expect a lot more. We've seen a lot of rank and file Democrats do so. We have not really seen the Democratic leadership yet offer its endorsement, trying to really assess what the playing ground is going to be, not trying to tip the scales one way or the other, trying to decide whether, frankly, they believe she'd be the best to be the person to take them to keep the White House in November. Barack Obama just put out a statement, Wolf, just moments ago, praising Joe Biden's service. He did stop short of offering an endorsement himself, really leaving this as an opportunity to praise Joe Biden, not getting into what is next. But that is going to be a big question. Where do the Democratic heavyweights come down? Do they try to rush to embrace Kamala Harris? I've been talking to Democratic strategists over the past hour or so since this news broke. They are trying to assess how she plays in some of those key races. Remember, what was Joe Biden's vulnerability? Young voters, oftentimes black voters, oftentimes brown voters. Can Kamala Harris shore up those key vulnerabilities, help piece together that Democratic coalition that really has been what Joe Biden has been struggling with to rebuild that coalition? But is she viewed as out of step in some of those more moderate districts? That's how Republicans will try to paint her if, in fact, she is a nominee. That is what the debate is going to be going forward. If she's the best candidate to rebuild that Democratic coalition, and if she can avoid being that polarizing presence that Republicans will undoubtedly try to make her out to be.
We're getting more reaction. Jeff Zeleny is with us as well. A lot of Democrats are reacting right now. Many of them are praising the president for this decision, but stopping short of publicly, formally endorsing the vice president, at least not yet.
Right. It's a split at this moment. The Clintons, we know, both former President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton have endorsed Harris. We are just getting, as Manu said, the new statement from former President Barack Obama in, and he does not endorse Harris in this statement. I am told by a senior advisor that that is not out of any question about her, but he wants to maintain the same role he did in 2020 in the primary campaign and stay out of it and be available to unite the party as needed. But Wolf, listen to this from former President Barack Obama, who, of course, chose Joe Biden as his running mate in 2008. They developed a close relationship, tense at times, but close as always. But Barack Obama says this: for him to look at the political landscape and decide he should pass the torch to a new nominee is surely one of the toughest decisions of his life. But I know he wouldn't make it unless he believed it was right for the country. He goes on to say that he's a patriot of the highest order. So this has a feel that Vice President Harris is also I'm told, thinking about campaign leadership even before she officially would become the nominee. That will happen in a couple weeks, but there is no time to waste here. So I'm told that she would largely leave a campaign apparatus in place, but could bring in her own people as well. And some former Obama aides, some very senior ones, I'm told, are being discussed for that. So this is moving very quickly. But again, behind the scenes, even as people waited for President Biden to make this very difficult decision for him, there was a sense that some of this was in the works. So we shall see in the coming hours, probably, or certainly days, if anyone actually steps forward to challenge her. I think that is going to be a difficult thing for someone to do.
Interesting, and one thing, Mano, I want to go back to you for a second. The Nancy Pelosi statement that was just released, significant. This is the former House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. President Joe Biden is a patriotic American who has always put our country first. His legacy of vision, values, and leadership make him one of the most consequential presidents in American history. Statement from Nancy Pelosi right there. But we didn't see in that statement a public formal endorsement of the vice president.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, too. She has been reportedly open to the idea of an open convention. What exactly would that look like? That is one question. That she has been engaged in so many behind-the-scenes talks with Democrats, sounding alarms about everything that's been going on within the Democratic Party. Of course, we know that she has spoken to President Biden himself about the concerns that she had. Notably, too, Wolf, last night when she was at a Democratic Party dinner, what was called a unity dinner in North Carolina, she could have gone out and said, Joe Biden is our nominee. We should stand behind him. Let's get behind him. She chose not to do that because she knew full well the concerns that so many people in the party had about Joe Biden carrying on. And undoubtedly, if she would come out publicly and say that Joe Biden should step aside, that could create even more problems for the president going forward. So the president saw the writing on the wall that this was only going to get much more difficult for the likes of people like Nancy Pelosi, potentially trying to undercut his bid if he decided to go forward and thought about going ahead. But we'll see where she lands. That is one of the questions that I've asked a bunch of Democrats today. Where will Pelosi come down? Will she endorse Kamala Harris? That's going to be a huge question this week.
All right, everybody stand by, guys. Lots going on, and a lot more is about to unfold right now as well. We're watching, as I keep saying, history unfolding here in the United States. I want to go back to Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, you've got a special guest coming up.
Yeah, Wolf, we have Senator Chris Coons here joining me. He is one of President Biden's closest allies and also the campaign co-chair. And Senator, thank you for being here. I just want to first get your reaction to, as it was just being described, one of clearly the toughest decisions President Biden has ever made.
Well, Caitlin, thanks for a chance to be on with you again. Joe Biden is a fighter. What has distinguished our president throughout decades of life is that every time he's been knocked down, he's gotten back up again. And we in Delaware, we who've served with him in the Senate, we who've loved and admired him for decades, admire his fight and his toughness. And he was convinced he could continue this fight and beat Donald Trump. But the last few weeks have been a difficult process. I would rather not focus on the process at all. I think today we should focus on Joe Biden's incredible legacy of service to our nation, his selflessness, his accomplishments in his decades in the Senate, leading the Judiciary Committee and Foreign Relations Committee as vice president, and now leading the Biden-Harris administration. It bears repeating that together, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the majority in the Senate and House managed to put into law earth-shaking, historic pieces of legislation that have cut prescription drug prices, helped our veterans, paved new roads, rebuilt our manufacturing, made us stronger at home and abroad. Last week, his leadership at the NATO summit reinforced his legacy as the most consequential foreign policy president of my lifetime. This coming week, he'll be rolling up his sleeves and continuing to work on getting the peace plan for Gaza moving forward. I'll remind you, he got this plan for the release of hostages and the cessation of fighting in Gaza endorsed by the UN Security Council, endorsed by the G7. And this coming week, I know he'll be putting his heart in it once again. Yeah, this is an historic moment where our president is choosing to step aside in the best interests of the nation. And that is in the best tradition of Joe Biden's life of putting our nation before himself.
Yeah, he's meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu on Tuesday, according to the schedule. Senator, have you talked to President Biden since he made this announcement?
Yes, I have.
And what did he say to you about how he came to this? Because obviously, as you know, we were following this closely for 3 weeks. He was resisting these calls. He said what you just said there, that he did feel that he could stay in this race, that he could beat Donald Trump. What changed in his mind?
Well, look, I think I'll leave that to President Biden to speak about. I am so grateful I've had a chance to be a co-chair of his reelection campaign. We have an incredible group of loyal and determined co-chairs who have fiercely supported and defended him. And I hope I get to play a role going forward in his 6 months ahead, where he will continue to make a difference in foreign policy and here at home. I have confidence, as does our president, in Vice President Harris. I served with her in the Senate. I've seen what a difference she has made as vice president, ensuring that we get more than 200 federal judges seated who are among the highest qualified, most diverse judges in our history. She has fought hard for freedoms and for rights of Americans, and she is a genuine leader. And I'm glad that President Biden has endorsed her today and made it clear the direction that he intends to take as the most respected senior leader in our party this fall. He was determined to beat Donald Trump and to make sure that the hard work he and Kamala Harris have done leading our country this last 4 years continues. And I think we should focus on that, on being united as a party and on honoring and respecting the very difficult choice Joe Biden has made today and the very great legacy that he's continued to build.
Does that mean you're also endorsing Vice President Harris as the next nominee?
I support Vice President Harris. I am very hopeful that we will come out of our convention next month united, and that everyone who has expressed concerns and hopes and thoughts and fears in the last months will continue to support the ticket that will win this fall. And we'll see what happens in terms of the choice for a running mate. But I think our president, Joe Biden, has made his endorsement clear. And I think that is the most important endorsement that we could all be paying attention to today.
What would you want to see in a running mate on a future Democratic ticket? Because obviously, you know, this is all happening very quickly, but it's going to have to be decided quickly based on what we're hearing from Democrats and Democratic donors. Who would you like to see on that ticket?
Look, Caitlin, I think today we should focus on Joe Biden's legacy. He is someone who is so grounded in Delaware, in his faith, in his family, in our tradition of bipartisanship. And my hope is that moving forward, whoever ends up being the partner to Vice President Harris will be someone who reflects some of that tradition and those values, someone who can help win, someone who can support an effective next administration, and someone who can make the case competently, in fact, fiercely, who is a good advocate and can take on the things that we heard on the stage in Milwaukee and push them back and successfully remind the American people of the incredible accomplishments of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as our president and vice president, and that the work that needs to be done is work that they can do.
Yeah, okay, so it's good to hear you say you do believe it is Vice President Harris that should be at the top of that next ticket. We'll see who, if it is her, who she would pick as her running mate. But on what you just said there, you know, we're already seeing calls from a lot of Republicans, including the House Speaker Mike Johnson, who say that they believe President Biden should resign from the presidency. And you just talked about what a tough decision this was for him. Do you expect that he would resign? What's your response to Mike Johnson?
No.
And how tough of a call do you believe this was for him?
No, I think that is ridiculous. I think President Biden has shown in recent weeks his ability to handle and manage complex international matters, to continue his lifelong record of service and his legacy of leadership in foreign policy, and to make hard calls and tough choices that help make us stronger and safer here at home. I expect President Biden will finish out his term this year, and there are things that remain to be done. We are still negotiating our annual appropriations bill, our Defense Authorization Act. As I just said, there is critical undone work to secure peace in Gaza and a stable and more secure future for Israel and the Israeli people. Joe Biden has more experience in foreign policy than any national leader. And to have him step aside now, I think would be a grave disservice to our nation and a profound disrespect to his legacy and his lifetime of service.
And I know you've got to go, Senator Coons. You're joining us on just breaking news that is happening as of this moment. Last question. President Biden said that he'll address the nation later this week. For people watching and just kind of stunned by this news, like frankly everyone is, what do you think that they should expect to hear from him?
I think they should expect to hear from Joe Biden what he has carried in his heart for decades, which is a deep belief in the American people. Joe Biden is an optimist. He knows how hard Americans work. He knows what we are capable of. He is an optimist. I've never forgotten his inaugural speech. He inherited 3 crises. We were still in the middle of a desperate, dangerous, difficult COVID pandemic and an economic downturn caused by that pandemic and a crisis of democracy. I'll remind you, when he was sworn in, it was just 2 weeks after January 6th, and he gave an inspiring and hopeful inaugural address. There were folks who said in Washington that he couldn't possibly accomplish the great and bold vision he laid out, the optimistic vision he laid out for what we could do together if we put down the tools of partisanship, come together as a country, and legislate and solve problems. 3.5 years later, I've had a chance to watch Joe Biden sign into law landmark bills, the most consequential legislative record since LBJ. And I expect you'll hear from him when he speaks in a few days about his confidence in the American people, the urgency of our coming together and putting aside partisan bickering and embracing the bright future that our country can have if we will just work together.
Yeah, massive news from him this afternoon. Senator Chris Coons, thank you for jumping on with us on this breaking news. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Caitlin.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And if you're just joining us, I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington, D.C. Caitlin Collins is joining us from New York. I want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. We're following major breaking news. President Biden has just dropped out of the 2024 presidential race and is publicly endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic presidential nominee. He made this historic and stunning announcement just before 2 p.m. Eastern earlier today, sending out a statement that reshapes the 2024 presidential race just 1 month before the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Caitlin.
And Wolf, we're learning that Biden made this decision within the last 48 hours, sources tell Jeff Zeleny, as Biden consulted his family, his top advisors by phone from that Delaware home. It's a decision that he kept very private, only notifying senior White House advisors and campaign staff moments before he went public with this announcement. In part, his statement said, quote, "While it may have been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term."
And Caitlin, we have our team of correspondents and analysts covering this historic breaking story. I want to go to CNN's Priscilla Alvarez. She's joining us from Rehoboth Beach in Delaware, where the president is in isolation right now. Give us the latest. What are you hearing over there, Priscilla?
Wolf, as the president was self-isolating at his residence here in Delaware from his positive COVID diagnosis, these were also days of self-reflection, days where he was clearly deliberating his next steps and whether or not he would run for re-election. We had that answer this afternoon when he put out that letter saying that he would step aside. Now, importantly, right after putting that out, he also said that he was fully throwing his support behind Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic nominee and urging the party to come together. It was a remarkable moment after weeks of Democratic lawmakers, allies, donors calling for the president to withdraw from the race over the last few weeks. The president has had multiple private conversations with lawmakers. He has tried to assuage their concerns on the campaign trail, but none of it was enough as lawmakers were still putting out letters just yesterday telling him he had to step aside. Now, this morning, to show you how quickly all of this came together, his campaign was saying that President Biden was in it to win it, that he was staying in the race and not going anywhere. But then hours later is when he put out this letter. Now, only moments before putting this out, he had notified his senior White House and campaign teams that according to a source who spoke with our MJ Lee. And I am also told by a source that he spoke with Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, in the moments since, donors, too, have been throwing their money behind the campaign. That, too, was a challenge for the campaign. So clearly a stunning development, and one that has been shocking to campaign and White House officials.
Priscilla Alvarez with the president in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Priscilla, thank you very much. We'll get back to you. MJ Lee is our senior White House correspondent. She's joining us from the White House right now. What else are you learning, MJ?
Well, these have been some 3+ agonizing weeks for President Biden and those close to him, even amid all of the growing calls that Priscilla was just talking about since that debate in late June. The president initially had very much dug in. He made very clear that even with the polls that he was being presented with, the data that was showing that things were not looking good for him, we know of private conversations where he insisted that he was, in fact, seeing polling and data that showed that he could defeat Donald Trump. One thing that I think is so important for us to just look back on for a second is President Biden, when he was running for the presidency back in 2020, he had described himself as a bridge and a transition candidate. And after that disastrous debate performance, a lot of Democrats were asking the question of, well, whatever happened to that? And I thought we got a really insightful answer from the president on that just last week. When he was asked about this, he said, I thought I was going to be able to move from this to pass it on to someone else, but I didn't anticipate things getting so divided, is what the president said. Earlier this year, when I asked him at a press conference, basically the same question, why does it have to be you on the ticket, given that so many voters across the country have questions about your age, your health and fitness? He said because he believes that he is the most qualified person to do the job and finish the job that he had started. So the picture that has emerged, Wolf, over the course of his presidency is that the president came into this job at the White House very much intending to be a transition candidate. But once he started doing the job, it became clear to him that it was going to be more difficult than he could have ever imagined for him to pass the torch, as he had once made clear he wanted to do back in 2020. Now, we should make clear for our viewers that the president, in announcing that he was going to drop out of the race, he also endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris. And now the party is in a place where, even given that endorsement, they need to actually figure out the process of how they move forward and decide who that nominee is going to be. We got an important statement from former President Barack Obama, and this was a really key line. After he, of course, praised his former vice president, he said, we will be navigating uncharted waters in the days ahead, but I have extraordinary confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges. So, Wolf, just in the moments after this remarkable news from the president that he was going to be leaving the race, we have heard from a lot of different Democrats and a lot of different voices, too, who fall on different sides of the argument. Should this be sort of a coronation with the president endorsing the vice president, or should there be a process that plays out where the party really gets together and figures out who that candidate is going to be? But one thing is for clear, the clock is ticking, and this has been a concern for so many Democrats as we have all been waiting for a decision from President Biden. Wolf.
And we're just about 2 weeks or so away from that Democratic convention in Chicago that will officially nominate the Democratic presidential candidate. We're watching all of this unfold. MJ, I understand that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, has issued her first public statement. I don't know if you have it right there, but presumably it's on your phone. If you didn't have it, maybe you could read it to our viewers.
Yeah, I've got it, Wolf. We do have the first public statement from Vice President Kamala Harris in the aftermath of President Biden dropping out of the 2024 race. She says that she was honored to have received President Biden's endorsement and intends to earn and win the nomination for the presidency. This, of course, is the first time that we are hearing from him. We did report earlier that President Biden and Vice President Harris did speak on the phone earlier today. That is not surprising. Just a little bit more from the Vice President's statement here. She says, I am honored to have the president's endorsement, and my intention is to earn and win this nomination. And she also says, talks about how it has been such a profound honor to have served as the president's vice president, expresses her gratitude to First Lady Jill Biden as well, and talks about sort of the relationship that they have built over the years, including the relationship that she had with the president's late son, Beau Biden. This, of course, is something that the president has talked about in the past as having been a factor when he was trying to decide who his vice presidential running mate would be back in 2020. The vice president also says in her statement, with this selfless and patriotic act, President Biden is doing what he has done throughout his life of service, putting the American people and our country above everything else. Wolf, all of the attention now is going to really be on Kamala Harris. This has already been the case for the last several weeks as we have been sort of in limbo, trying to see where the president was going to land in terms of his own decision. But of course, given that things seemed headed in the wrong direction for the president for a while now, there has been a lot of speculation about Vice President Harris and whether an endorsement formally would come from the president, which of course it has. And so now we are going to be paying close attention to everything that she does just in the coming days. How does she carry herself in public now that this news is out? Does she sort of step up her campaign operations, which according to our reporting, of course, is going to be the case. We already know that in the last several days, we have seen her sort of step up as the president has been in Rehoboth, including at the last minute jumping on a call with concerned donors just several days ago, within the last 48 hours or so. So this is something now that is totally a different situation for Vice President Kamala Harris than it was, of course, a day ago, and all attention is going to be on her as the party now figures out how they are going to move forward with this nomination process. Wolf.
Yeah, she's going to be the leader of the Democratic Party and the Democratic presidential nominee. We'll watch all of this very closely. MJ Lee, we'll get back to you. Thank you very, very much. Dramatic developments unfolding right now as well. Caitlin, I want to go back to you.
Yeah, Wolf, obviously we're monitoring this. Everything is changing by the moment here. We just got that news from Senator Chris Coons a few moments ago. That is the co-chair of the Biden campaign, getting behind Harris as the nominee as well, saying that they will talk about in the coming days who she could select to put on that ticket with her as her running mate. Obviously, a dramatic development to see Harris now in this situation. We're waiting to see what other Democrats continue to say about this. I want to go back to Van Jones because, Van, you were just talking about what this day means and the significance of this in a personal level for President Biden. But also, it's a real calculus now for Democrats of what do they do, given there are 4 months to go before the presidential election. What do you make of Harris's statement where she plans to earn and win this nomination?
I think that's very politically astute of her to say that because, again, this is a party that runs by rules, and we take the rules very seriously. Technically, Joe Biden can't just say, you're now the nominee. If Joe Biden stepped down from president, the Constitution says she's automatically president. But this is not about the Constitution. This is about the Democratic Party. And under our rules, it's the delegates who make the decision. It's not Joe Biden. It's not Kamala Harris. It's not Nancy Pelosi. It's not the Clintons. It's not the Obamas. Our delegates make the decision. And so she's being very politically astute by saying to the delegates, I am going to work to earn your support. I appreciate the support I'm getting from the Clintons and from everyone else, but I understand that it comes down to you. And by saying she's going to work to earn that support, I think that's very, very smart. So that gives the delegates the opportunity to feel that they can, they have a job to do. They have to make a decision here. Also, I think that she's letting other people know the water's warm. You want to jump in? You want to get some? You can try to earn these delegates' support as well. She's not saying, if you come against me, it's a problem. She's not closing the door. She's not saying, I accept Joe Biden, therefore I'm in. No. So that puts other Democrats in a very interesting position. If you're a swing state governor, if you're a rising star in this party, if you're a celebrity, if you're somebody who wants to say, look, I don't believe in Kamala Harris. I don't trust that she can win. I think I can win. What are you going to do? You're going to have to make the decision that, no, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to say, I think I could do a better job. I think I can win Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. I think I've got a better shot. And I want those delegates to listen to me. So you're going to have to watch over the next 24, 48 hours. Does anybody else raise their hand and say that they want to also earn the nomination? What she's acknowledging is the nomination is not yet hers. And that's a very, very big deal. That's a true fact, but in other parties, you might just have somebody just demagogue it, steamroll it, say, everybody get behind me, I am now going to lead this party. She's not doing that. Very politically astute.
But Van, you've been involved in Democratic politics your whole life. To see the Clintons, the president, top senators getting behind her as the nominee, do you think anyone else, if you are a governor or a Democrat who has a lot of star potential going forward, that they'd be brave enough to kind of get in this ring at this point with seeing who's lining up behind Harris so far?
It would take an extraordinary amount of self-confidence and belief in self to do it. But are there doors that are still open? Yes, there are doors that are still open. For instance, Pelosi hasn't yet said she's for Kamala. President Obama, as usual, is staying very, very neutral, at least publicly, to make sure that, because he is the rock star of rock stars in this party, that he doesn't tip it one way or the other. And so you do have some doors that are still open. And so, but the grade just got steeper because Joe Biden gave the endorsement. He gave it immediately. The Clintons came out immediately. It wasn't just, by the way, wasn't just Bill Clinton. Let's be fair, it was Bill Clinton and it was Hillary Clinton, a beloved, powerful nominee. The last time we nominated a woman, it was Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton came out immediately and said, I'm with Kamala. So the grade just got steeper for you, but the door is not yet closed politically. It's certainly not closed from a bureaucratic or technical point of view. Kamala Harris wants to earn that nomination. I guarantee you the whip operation, it's called a whipping operation. She had people who love her, who believe in her, who work with her for years, who are calling delegates, who are calling online personalities and other people, trying to get people ready to stick with Kamala if the ball comes to her. And so can you put together a whipping operation that's as strong as Kamala's in a short period of time? You have to look at a lot of different challenges here. But if somebody has the fire in the gut and say, listen, I don't believe Kamala can win it at the top of the ticket. I don't believe this. I don't believe that. I think I can do it. Kamala Harris just said, come on in, the water's warm.
Well, and you know what I thought about when I saw that both Clintons got behind her? I was thinking of Hillary Clinton, because she is a woman who knows what it's like to run against Donald Trump. And that could be the position we see Harris in. We don't know yet. Obviously, we are keeping our powder dry. We're waiting to see what Democrats decide here. But it does seem like that's a scenario the Trump campaign has been prepping for. They have been singling out Harris. I noticed it multiple times when you and I were in Milwaukee last week for the Republican convention. And I just wonder what, on its early basis, what you think that race would look like, a Harris versus Donald Trump.
The prosecutor versus the person who got prosecuted. I mean, it kind of writes itself in some ways from our side. Also, you have a younger voice. You have a younger, more dynamic presence. You have somebody who, we've never seen this before. We've never seen a black female, an Asian female. You've never seen that before. And I think Trump's got to figure out how he wants to deal with it. They love to demean women. That's something that the Trump team does a lot. They do it too much. It actually goes against, they put women in positions of power sometimes inside the Trump team, but they still have this public thing of just demeaning women. That's tougher to do when you've got someone like Kamala Harris. Is Kamala Harris going to make the abortion issue a lot tougher? Kamala Harris, the first couple of years, she wasn't impressing a lot of people. Her polling numbers weren't that good. Her confidence inside the Democratic Party wasn't that high. But you've seen her over the past year get stronger and stronger on the stump. You've seen her get more and more self-confident in interviews. You've also seen the party warming up to her, especially black voters who are so critical. And so you've got a real matchup here, because you've got somebody who has, at times been a very, very strong in that prosecutor role. Most people think about Kamala Harris. They don't think about her as vice president. They think about her being in the Senate, grilling nominees from the Trump administration, grilling CEOs, just going after people and putting them in their place. So that side of her personality gets a chance to come forward now in a very different way. Kamala Harris won a lot of support from people when Biden stumbled. He didn't do well in the debate. Everybody was freaking out. And I was sitting right next to Anderson Cooper when Anderson Cooper brought Kamala Harris on. Mm-hmm. She was cool. She was calm. She was collected. She was strong. There was no time for anybody to hand her talking points. There was no time for anybody to write up a speech. There was no teleprompter. She had to just literally walk out there after her running mate had fallen, look in that camera, and deliver. And she delivered such a strong performance that it gave people in this party much more confidence in her. So she's riding a little bit of a wave now of momentum and support. But the door is not closed. There is a process we have to go through. There are still big donors and big figures in our party that have not yet said where they stand. So if somebody wants to jump in, it is not a done deal yet. Somebody could still yet challenge Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and a great point on age, because that had been the detraction for Biden, but for Trump, he just became the oldest presidential nominee in American history. Van Jones, obviously, we're going to be watching all this very closely. Van Jones, thank you for that. Wolf, back to you.
All right, Caitlin, thank Van for me as well. Our viewers are always interested in his thoughts, very important thoughts indeed. Phil Mattingly is here with us here in Washington. Phil, you're working your sources. You're getting more information. What are you learning?
Getting a better understanding of the timeline. Obviously, we saw the letter today. I think it landed at 1:46 p.m. this afternoon. Staff was told, I think Jeff Zeleny reported earlier, was told, and MJ Lee was told 1:45 p.m. The actual process for drafting that letter, I'm told, actually started on Saturday afternoon into the evening. The president, who obviously is isolating with COVID right now, with the First Lady in Rehoboth, is long known to have a very close-knit circle of advisors, including Steve Ricchetti, who's been with him since the vice president's office, Mike Donilon, who's kind of his personal mind meld messaging guru as well. They were both called last night and informed that the president wanted to start this process of drafting the letter. Steve Ricchetti was responsible for handling the mechanics of how this would all roll out and how it would all be discussed and released publicly. And so that process started on Saturday night. We know that they've been weighing this process over the course of the last 48 hours as the data continued to come in. And what I'm told is that there was a recognition that there was simply not going to be a way to turn it around, even though for weeks they thought it was possible. The Democratic infighting, the almost internal intra-party fratricide to some degree, was just weighing down things too much, and it was time to make this decision and move forward with the decision that we saw today from the president. His close advisors, it's worth noting, Steve Ricchetti and Mike Donilon and the First Lady as well, they were all in the room in 2016 when the president was considering whether or not to run in that campaign to primary Hillary Clinton. It was actually Mike Donilon at that time, at least according to President Biden and his book, who told President Biden that in the wake of the death of his son, Beau, that in one of their final meetings that it was not the right time. He was not ready to do it. And so that's kind of the relationship they have. It's a very, very close circle. And that circle was once again called into action last night as they started moving this process forward.
Was it the poll numbers that were so disturbing to the president? Was it the fact that fundraising may be going down? Was it the public statements coming out from all these Democrats in the House and the Senate, for example? What were the main factors that caused him to rethink? Because until yesterday, until now, we had been repeatedly told, not just by the president, but all of his senior campaign advisors and White House officials, he's in it to win it. He's not going anywhere.
And my understanding is that was very much the view of things. I think there's no singular factor here. It's a convergence of all of these issues into one. But more than anything else, what I've been told over the course of the last several hours is it's the weight of the Democratic infighting, the fact that the president could not get past this moment to make the case, to draw the contrast, to have the actual kind of binary re-election battle that he was searching for, that they believe that they can win. That was kind of the overarching reason why. But I do think that the money, the Democratic support, I think there's a recognition, too. Lawmakers are going to be back in town this week, and it was only expected to build. And when leaders got microphones in their faces, what were they going to say? They were out last week during the Republican convention. And so there was a recognition over the course of the last 48 hours that this was probably the path that needed to be taken, launched last night, and obviously announced today.
And to Phil's point, I mean, I was told that it was the weight of what all this has done on the Democratic ticket overall, and the difficulty and the much more uphill challenge it was to defeat Donald Trump. I mean, President Biden has read polls for literally since the invent of political polling. His career has tracked that trajectory. But when told that he was really weighing down the Democratic ticket, I'm told that was something that he finally came to realize. I'm also told that he was making some calls sort of outside. We talk a lot about the tight circle of advisors, was calling some people even outside of that, trying to get their read on things. So he was really working this, trying every way possible to find a way to stay in, but the reality just became way too much. And yesterday, the letter from the national security advisors, former national security advisors on the team, all these officials, that also cut very deeply at him. And if he would have decided to stay in the race, he has been trying to make Donald Trump the disqualified candidate. Suddenly, all of these Democratic officials who have come out and spoke to us over the last 3 weeks, those would be used in ads against him. So taken together, all of this, it was just too much.
It was a dramatic, historic moment indeed, and we have a lot more news coming up. We're going to take a quick break. Much more of our very special breaking news coverage of this historic day here in the United States right after this.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And if you're just joining us, we want to get you up to speed on our major breaking news right now. President Joe Biden just announcing a short while ago that he is stepping out of the race and will not seek re-election in November. He's now publicly endorsing his Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic presidential nominee. We've now also learned he made that decision just within the last 48 hours or so, and he consulted very closely with his family and top advisors.
Yeah, Wolf, he also alerted senior White House advisors and his campaign staff just moments before this decision became public and upended the 2024 race as we know it. This is his statement that he released a little more than an hour ago, shocking the nation, frankly, Wolf, with President Biden saying in part, quote, "While it may have been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term."
Dramatic statement indeed. I want to bring in CNN senior White House correspondent MJ Lee. She's joining us from the White House right now. MJ, update our viewers on the latest information we're getting.
Yeah, Wolf, I am just learning that Vice President Kamala Harris did not know about President Biden's decision to drop out of the 2024 race until earlier today. They, of course, spoke earlier today. We are told that they have spoken at least multiple times. But the fact that the vice president didn't know until today, the day of the day that the president decided to go public with the decision, perhaps illustrates best of all that at the end of the day, this really was President Joe Biden's decision and his alone. How closely was this decision held? According to our colleagues Arlette Saenz and Phil Mattingly's reporting, the process of announcing this today was really set in motion last night when the president asked his closest advisors, Mike Donilon and Steve Ricchetti, to begin the process of writing that letter that we, of course, saw this afternoon announcing his ultimate decision. As for others on the president's team, the senior-most staff, including somebody like Anita Dunn, who for so long has been considered really among the really inner circle of advisors close to the president. They were all folks that were not informed about this decision until really literally moments before that letter went public. Now, the president, of course, has already had sort of a famously small and impenetrable group of advisors, but we know over the course of the last few weeks from all of our reporting that that group had become even more small and just even more sort of insulated, and that had raised a lot of questions among Democrats about what kind of information he was getting, what kind of advice he was getting, and of course that sort of fed into why the last few weeks have felt so painful for so many Democrats that were watching this process unfold and were waiting for this decision that the president finally made public today. Wolf.
Very dramatic development indeed, and it didn't leak out in advance, even though some of the closest advisors, family members were being told about it. It only became public once the president himself issued that public statement on social media, and then it became public, and all of us were pretty stunned, given the fact that so many of his advisors and the president himself for days and days and days had been insisting he was staying in this race to try to get reelected. Caitlin, I want to go back to you.
Wolf, and I just want to note that we are getting breaking news in hearing from Jim Clyburn. Obviously, he is known as the Democratic kingmaker. He was critical to Biden's election in 2020 and making him the Democratic nominee when he endorsed him and came out. And obviously, we saw what happened with President Biden in South Carolina. And he has just issued a lengthy statement. And he was just on CNN a few hours ago with our colleague Jake Tapper and was saying that he was staying with President Biden as long as he was in this race. Now that President Biden has exited this race and that dramatic statement this afternoon, I just want to read you in part what Congressman Jim Clyburn is saying. He says, I've had the honor and privilege of calling President Biden a friend for many years. And he said, while I endorsed him in then 2020, I noted how I could think of no one with the integrity and no one more committed to the fundamental principles that form the foundation of our great country than him. Clyburn goes on to say in his statement, talking about the accomplishments that he believes President Biden has had while in office. And then he also says, and this is the key part, Wolf, I echo the good judgment that he demonstrated in selecting Vice President Harris to lead this nation alongside him. And I am proud to follow his lead in support of her candidacy to succeed him as the Democratic Party's 2024 nominee for president. That is a huge deal here, Wolf, to see Jim Clyburn getting behind Vice President Harris as the Democratic nominee here. Obviously, we're still watching to see how this plays out with other Democratic leaders, waiting to hear from them. I want to bring in CNN's senior political commentator and former senior advisor to President Barack Obama, David Axelrod here. Obviously, Ax, we had been waiting to see if this was actually going to happen. First, we haven't heard from you yet. What's your reaction to President Biden exiting the 2024 race?
Yeah, Caitlin, you know, I got the news on a plane coming into New York, and, you know, it was I was very sad, honestly. I think it was necessary. It's important. It's an incredibly important decision and difficult decision that he made for the country, but not the final chapter that he imagined, and not maybe the final chapter that he deserved. But there is a real focus on the question that he has put in front of people again and again and again, and that is who and how can the Democratic Party defeat Donald Trump? And I think in that regard, the party took a step forward today, and the president recognized it and did the hardest thing you can do and stepped aside.
I mean, it's, you know, Van Jones was talking earlier about what a tough decision this must have been for President Biden. And when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, I mean, to go from a little over 3 weeks ago, showing up in Atlanta to debate Donald Trump, and then to this decision now is a pretty quick time span in the grand scheme of things. But I wonder what you made, given you were a senior advisor to President Obama, in his statement, obviously thanking Biden for his service, commenting on his exit from the race, but not going as far as to endorse Harris or anyone to take the top of the ticket. Is that posturing on his part, or do you think that's just him taking a moment before getting involved and lining up behind someone else as the next nominee?
Look, I think that, again, I think the focus of many leaders in the party is going to be singular, and it's going to be how and who can defeat Donald Trump. And that may well be Kamala Harris. You know, I think some of her supporters have done her a disservice because they say, well, she's there, you know, she's historic, you can't bypass her, and so on. The real case they should be making is why she'd be the strongest candidate. And there are some really strong arguments to suggest she would be. But she might be stronger if she comes through a process that is open. And I noticed in her own statement, she said she wanted to compete and earn the nomination. And it would be good for her if that was the conclusion that people drew. She's certainly capable of doing that. She's the only one who's being discussed who's actually been swimming in the deep end of the pool. Running for national office, president or vice president, is unbelievably hard. And no one who hasn't done it has any idea, no matter what you've run for before. You know, she may be battle-scarred, but she's also she's battle-tested in a way others aren't. And they should be making that case. But I think that people are going to take a hard look at this, try and open up the process and see if others step forward. Others may not. But she would be in a stronger position if she can say, I went through a process and I emerged as the nominee of the Democratic Party by dint of that process, and not just as a gesture by the president to hand me this nomination.
David, I think for people watching, understandably, what's happened just in the last week alone has been seismic in U.S. politics. But I think if you look over the last 6 months, I mean, Donald Trump, the candidate, Republican nominee, he was then presumptive, was convicted of 34 felonies. There was an attempted assassination of him 8 days ago. And then today we see a sitting president take himself out of the running. I just, from a historical perspective, It's a lot to
God.
process.
It really is. I mean, you know, look, I've lived through a lot of these election cycles, and I really haven't seen anything quite like this since the 60s, you know, when we had all those, we had several assassinations. Robert Kennedy appeared as if he was had seized the nomination the night he won the California primary and was killed that night, or shot that night and died 2 days later, and threw the party into turmoil. We had a very tumultuous convention in Chicago. Hubert Humphrey emerged as the nominee. He was the vice president for Lyndon Johnson and carried some of the burden of Johnson and the Vietnam War with him, and almost won anyway, lost by a point, closed very fast. But that whole year was one unthinkable thing after another. It feels a little bit like that now. And the thing that we probably need to focus on is the fact that there is an election coming in November, and I think that election has changed in a dramatic way today. Donald Trump, he certainly was a colossus in Milwaukee last week, but in the rest of the country, not so much. He's a vulnerable candidate and can be beaten, and Democrats are going to begin to focus on that. There's a lot of sadness about the president, a lot of love and affection for him, but I think people are also steeled to the task at hand.
Yeah, I spoke to Trump moments after Biden put out this statement, and he called him the worst president in U.S. history. And then he said that he does believe Harris would be easier to beat. Obviously, we don't know if that's who he'll be facing in this election, but this is not just uncertainty for Democrats, it's uncertainty for the Trump campaign as well. David Axelrod, stand by because I want to get back to you, but we also have Abby Phillip here joining, CNN anchor and CNN's senior political correspondent. And Abby, I mean, this is just such a seismic moment in this campaign. I wonder what you're hearing from Democratic sources, from donors about what this new landscape looks like now.
Yeah, Caitlin, I've been talking to a number of people today and definitely over the last several days. And the big thing right now is how quickly can Vice President Harris consolidate this field. And I spoke with a top fundraiser for the Biden-Harris campaign who's in touch with dozens of donors who said, you know, right now, this is hers to win, lose. And frankly, she has 24 to 48 hours to do so. But this person did not believe that there was any sort of truly organized effort to push someone else other than the vice president, which is something that is key in these moments. There is certainly a faction of donors who want an open process. They want to see if there's perhaps someone else who might be stronger against Trump, but that is not at this moment organized in any sort of way. And so that leaves the vice president in a really strengthened position. And this person also said that the donors are prepared to back her, and that's going to be critically important. This is being viewed by many people in the Democratic Party as the path of least resistance. She has the clearest path to inheriting the campaign infrastructure, the clearest path to inheriting the money that has been raised by the Biden-Harris campaign up until this point. And the other thing, you know, talking to another source who's very close to the vice president, there is a lot of concern about the really compressed timeline right now to get all of these ducks in a row. There are so many decisions that need to be made, so many parts of this that are completely unknown, and even the people who are the most supportive of her, who want this to eventually end up with the vice president as the top of the ticket, they are worried, is how this person put it to me. So look, the next day or two are going to be extremely critical. One of the other factors in all of this is going to be which candidate is best positioned to actually get the delegates, because that's really where this ends up at this point. And many people close to the vice president have stressed to me there are a lot of structural and political reasons why she is by far in the best position. When we talk about the importance of black voters and black delegates are to this Democratic Party, that's not just a talking point. It's a real practicality about where the powerhouses are within the Democratic National Committee. And those are the people in the coming days who are going to decide how this goes and who this goes to. And I imagine shortly after that, the discussion about who would be her running mate is going to accelerate as well. I'm already hearing, as I'm sure you are as well, a lot of whispers about that as well, Caitlin.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the amount of the ways that Democrats' phones are blowing up today, it cannot be overstated. I mean, everyone is talking about this and asking that very question. One, who's the nominee going to be? And two, if it is Harris, what does that ticket look like? Abby Phillip, we'll continue to report on this, continue to have those conversations. Let us know what you're hearing. We also have Scott Jennings, a CNN senior political commentator, here with us. Scott, I mean, this is just as much uncertainty for Republicans as it is for Democrats. You heard what former President Trump said to me moments after Biden announced this. We're already seeing a well-funded super PAC of his attacking Harris, something they had kind of been preparing in case this very scenario happened. What does this moment mean for Republicans?
Yeah, it's shocking. I mean, if I had known the second coming of the Lord Almighty was going to happen on the East Coast this weekend, I wouldn't have gone to San Diego. I'd have been there with you. But here we are, 3 weeks after the cheap fakes, by the way, episode, which the most embarrassing gaslighting that ever happened. I mean, Republicans are going to paint Kamala Harris as Joe Biden. She's been number 2 in the administration that has a mid-30s approval rating that's overseeing this inflation crisis. She was the border czar for the immigration crisis that everybody is mad about. And on top of that, she's been one of the principal ringleaders of the cover-up of Joe Biden's actual condition. So I hear I've been listening for the last couple of hours, a lot of crowing and pumping up of Kamala Harris. But let's not forget, she's not a great politician. She ran for president once, and it was a complete disaster. And right now, it looks like she, Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and a bunch of rich people have just pushed Joe Biden out of this race and in the process disenfranchised millions of Democrat voters.
Well, obviously, President Biden made this decision, one that, some Democrats wanted him to make it sooner than now. But
is it interesting to you that we haven't seen a picture of Joe Biden today? We don't have a picture of him signing the letter. I mean, this is a huge decision. Also, the letter doesn't say why exactly he's stepping down. Why is he stepping down? He's the current. We've been talking about this for weeks. He's the current president. He's now apparently unable to continue in his race. We don't know why exactly he is stepping down. I think Republicans who are raising concerns about his fitness to lead today have good questions today, and now they're unanswered by this letter and the mystery surrounding him today.
Yeah, well, he does have COVID, so I think that's probably why we're not seeing him. I just talked to Chris Coons, his co-chair, who spoke to him after this announcement came out and talked about this. He said he's not resigning the presidency, despite those calls from people like House Speaker Mike Johnson. But I do wonder, Scott, what does this mean if Harris is the nominee? I mean, let's game this out for a second. What does that mean for the Trump campaign? Because they have been preparing to run against President Biden. They thought it would be a pretty easy race for them after that debate in Atlanta. But this is, even if you make the assumptions that you just made about Vice President Harris, it's still not fully known how they would fare against one another. There's no polling that we can really look at to give us any indication of what this moment could mean.
Well, she certainly has an approval rating. I mean, you can go online and see that her approval rating is no better than Joe Biden's, and it's because they connect her to Joe Biden. I mean, she is not a disconnected figure. She is his vice president. She was heavily involved in the immigration crisis fiasco that we have going on. And so I think the Trump campaign is actually going to have a pretty easy case to make that, we switched from Biden to Harris, but you're sticking with the same policies. They were already arguing in some ways that a vote for Biden was simply a vote for Harris because nobody expected Biden to be able to go for another 4 years anyway. So I don't think they're going to have much trouble making the transition. Where the game changes is on age. Biden was a little older than Trump and obviously made a big deal about that. And so that's where one piece of the game changes. But on policy and political arguments, I actually think it's a pretty easy transition.
Yeah, Trump is now the oldest nominee that we've ever seen in U.S. presidential history. Scott Jennings, stand by. We got to squeeze a quick break in as we are following this breaking news with President Biden announcing that he is exiting the 2024 race. He got behind Vice President Harris as the Democratic nominee. We are seeing notable endorsements from their party. Some people not saying yet who they are going to get behind, but this entire 2024 race has changed. We are following every development here. We'll be back after a quick break.
If you're just joining us, we want to get you up to speed on all the historic breaking news we're following. President Joe Biden just announcing a short while ago that he is stepping out of the presidential race and will not seek re-election in November. He's now publicly endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris, as the Democratic nominee. We've now learned he made that decision just within the past 48 hours as he consulted with his family and top advisors. He alerted his senior White House advisors and campaign staff just moments before making his decision public. In a statement released a little more than an hour or so ago, President Biden said, and I'm quoting him in part, "While it may have been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interests of my party and country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Close quote. We have a panel covering this breaking story for all of us, but I want to start with CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel. Jamie, you're learning more information about how all of this unfolded.
So first of all, I think we've said this before, but it's worth saying again, this was a surprise to Kamala Harris and her team today. And the first thing I'm told that they're looking at is logistics. They have a campaign to put together. She has to get the nomination. She has to see, as Phil was talking about earlier, whether anyone's going to challenge her. The other thing is simply, how does she get her name on the ballot? Yes, she is part of this infrastructure with the campaign and the convention, but this is a whole new game. And the last thing I'm told, multiple sources said we should look for the following. Will she reach out to another candidate, and they gave me some names, to put together a ticket? This is two reasons. One, to get some challengers maybe to go away who might be considering it, but also to get the party to coalesce around a new team to create excitement and to win. The names that are being floated that she might be interested in reaching out to, I don't think they'll come as a surprise. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, who I am told she likes a lot, knows very well. And as we saw just a little while ago, he has already come out to endorse her publicly. That happened very quickly, and I know their camps speak to each other quite often. The other names will also be familiar. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear has been mentioned a lot, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. There are clearly others, but those four names are the names I keep hearing about.
Yeah, those names have been out there for a while. Casey,
I was going to say, those are the names that are in all of the conversations that I'm having right now. And we saw the Pennsylvania Governor, Josh Shapiro, come out and say something very nice about Biden. From what I can tell, has yet to endorse Kamala Harris. Maybe that email has crossed, so forgive me if I'm a little bit slow on this, but I do think that's an interesting contrast in terms of when you compare it to how Mark Kelly is handling it. And obviously, they have to think a lot. And I had a lot of conversations with the RNC about this, actually, about how this race is going to change with her at the top of the ticket, what the strengths and weaknesses of a Harris ticket are. They're different from the strengths and weaknesses with Biden at the top of the ticket, and they really have to think through that and consider that as they're thinking about picking their number two.
One of the advantages, a major advantage she had as becoming the heir apparent to the president after he drops out, was that it's the Biden-Harris campaign that raised tens of millions of dollars. There's a ton of money in that campaign, and since it's the Biden-Harris campaign, she can continue to use that money as the presidential nominee.
That's right, and if they're worried about logistics, it is a heck of a lot, and Karen, I'm sure you can weigh in on this, logistically easier to have Kamala Harris be the top of the ticket here. The other thing that you, I think, have to think through, and I was having a conversation with a very smart operative that's been in Kamala Harris's circle in the past, has been inside the Biden administration. They were arguing, as someone who has advised a lot of candidates, right? If you are Josh Shapiro, if you are Andy Beshear, if you are someone that has national ambitions, what is the right move for you right now? Putting yourself out there, angering an enormous segment of the party in black voters by challenging Kamala Harris, and also just potentially going on to lose either that fight or the election, won both. Instead, you could be her number two, be seen as someone who is stepping up for the party. And if Democrats lose in November, you've only been on the ticket for 80 days. Is it really your fault? So I think that there's some of that going on behind the scenes, too.
Audie, I want to get your thoughts on how the African
of this entire thing. I would say. I mean, think about it. I think it was May 30th that we were all sitting here talking about how the race would change sentence caps because of Trump's conviction, and it's just been a roller coaster ever since then. I think there are some people out there who may have winced a little, Wolf, when you said heir apparent, because one of the concerns they have is, will it look like big donors just big-footed the voters in the Democratic primary process and got the result that they wanted. So I think that's why you hear the vice president talking about earning the vote. And one other thing I want to mention is a few weeks ago, the Pew, I think it was the AP polling, was showing that while black support for Biden to stay in was more than other groups, within the black community, it was 50-50. So it was at a tipping point. And so while today is a shock in timing, the writing's been on the wall for a couple days now, and I think it's worth us all taking a breath and realizing that this just happened, something that hasn't happened since, 1968, since Johnson. I mean, this is a momentum occasion for a major politician of our time.
It certainly is. And Phil, the support for Vice President Kamala Harris from Democrats is pouring in right now. Is there anyone else that is stepping out there to potentially challenge her?
Not yet. I think everybody right now is watching, as Casey was saying, what the governors say, whether they endorse or whether they say we're not going to challenge her is probably the biggest question. Look, I think there's a reality. There's a couple of key pieces here. One, the campaign mechanics, as Casey was pointing out, in terms of money, in terms of staff, in terms of ad reservation, like all of it. Is significantly easier. It's still a little bit complicated, but significantly easier if the vice president is the nominee. I think, two, you have the coalition issues, which obviously people need to be very, very cognizant of. But I think the third here is it's been 3 weeks of Democratic wars, just intra-party wars that kept them from talking about what they want to talk about, which is the former president, the binary choice, the message, the contrast, everything that they think they can win on, they have not been doing over the course of the last 3 weeks. So why would you want to set up a process where you're just doing it for another several weeks? And so I think everybody's very cognizant of that. And I think even some Democrats I've talked to who aren't the biggest fans of the vice president have said, look, this is where we need to go. Clearly, this has taken long enough. It's time to move forward. But I think I'm actually interested from a reporting perspective on what you know about what's been going on behind the scenes, because we've seen a lot of groups come out. I've been told that there have been efforts to bring big endorsements into play over the course of this day to kind of lock everything up. Not in a way to disenfranchise people, but just to say it's time to move forward.
Correct. I mean, look, as full disclosure, I was literally one of the people who made the case directly to Joe Biden for Kamala Harris to be the vice president. So no surprise. I'm sad about Joe Biden, but thrilled about this opportunity for Kamala. Yeah, exactly what you just said. I mean, people have been thinking about this as a possibility for the last several weeks. Donors have been thinking about it, as well as different groups. You're going to continue to see throughout the afternoon different progressive groups and members of Congress come out and acknowledge their support for her. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we've got to take a quick break. We're going to continue all of our analysis, all of our reporting right after this. We'll be right back. If you're just joining us, I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. Caitlin Collins joins us from New York. I want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. We're following very fast-moving, major breaking news. President Biden has dropped out of the 2024 presidential race and is publicly endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic presidential nominee. He made the historic and stunning announcement at around 1:45 p.m. Eastern Time earlier today, sending out a statement that reshapes the 2024 presidential race just 1 month before the Democratic National Convention in Chicago.
And Wolf, we're now learning from sources that the president's exit plans were set into motion operationally last night, finalized today before he made that announcement. We're also told by sources, according to CNN's MJ Lee, that Vice President Harris was not notified about that decision, that final decision from the president, until today. We are told that President Biden consulted his family, his top advisors, by phone from his Delaware home. That's where he's been recovering from COVID for the last several days. And this is a decision that he kept very private, only notifying his senior White House aides and staff from the campaign moments before he went public with this unprecedented announcement. That announcement, Wolf, read in part, and I'm quoting the president now, "While it may have been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of the term." I've got a team of correspondents here with us, Wolf, but let's start with you in Washington.
All right, Caitlin, we got a lot going on right now. I want to bring in our senior White House correspondent, MJ Lee. She's joining us from the White House right now. I know you're constantly getting updates, more information. What else are you learning, MJ?
Yeah, Wolf, this has been a remarkable afternoon. Just 4 months out from Election Day, President Biden making public today his decision to drop out of the 2024 race. He said that he had every intention of continuing to seek a second term, but in a letter released to the public this afternoon, he wrote that "I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Wolf, this was an incredibly closely held decision that was made, we are told, within the last 48 hours or so. And almost everybody close to the president, including senior-most advisors, were in the dark until basically moments before that letter went public. We are told that last night the president asked some of his closest aides, chief among them Mike Donilon and Steve Ricchetti, to begin the process of making this decision public, including by starting to draft that letter that we saw this afternoon. The president, of course, importantly, has endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris, saying he is offering his full support and endorsement to be the nominee of our party this year, and really called on the Democratic Party to rally around her and support her. But, Wolf, we really cannot overstate how much pressure the president had come under in recent weeks, ever since that debate performance at the end of June, from donors calling on him to forgo a second term and seeking a second term. Democratic elected officials, of course, really putting the pressure on him to reconsider his decision. And initially, we saw a picture of a president that was incredibly dug in, even saying that he was confident in the polling and the data that he was being presented with, even in the face of polling and data that clearly showed that he was slipping in the polls, both nationally and in key battleground states. And then in recent days, we did start to see a picture emerge of the president perhaps being a little bit more reflective and willing to contemplate an end where the president would drop out of the 2024 race. Now, this is a man, Wolf, who had pledged back in 2020 to be a bridge and a transition candidate. And a picture that has emerged is one where the president, after getting into his job, decided that things were just simply too serious. And he believed that he really was the person most qualified to finish out the job that he had started. But of course, with this decision today, he is now returning to becoming that transition candidate, and he is certainly hoping that he can pass on that baton to his vice president, Kamala Harris. Wolf?
These next several weeks and months will be critically important, and as I keep saying, historic, obviously, as well. MJ Lee at the White House will get back to you. I know you're always working your sources. Caitlin, go ahead and pick it up.
Yeah, Wolf, hard to see how it can get more historic than what we are watching right now. This is now FEC official, as there has been a notification to them with a letter saying that this is to inform you that Vice President Harris is no longer a candidate in the 2024 election for vice president. It says Vice President Harris is now a candidate for United States president in the 2024 election and will henceforth be conducting campaign activities only in pursuit of that office. This is a statement to essentially let the FEC know this. Well, it's hard to imagine that letter existing 3 weeks ago before that debate in Atlanta, but it is now the reality that is facing the Democratic Party, but also Republicans, who are now in a wave of fresh uncertainty of who it is that Donald Trump is going to face on the ticket this November. I've got CNN anchor and senior political correspondent Abby Phillip here with me, as well as CNN's senior political commentator and former Obama administration official Van Jones. Van, I mean, it's just to look at that in black and white on the FEC website and to see Harris is now the candidate for the 2024 presidency is something that would have been unthinkable a month ago.
Well, absolutely. It's just unbelievable. This year is very, like, we're tracking 1968 now almost beat for beat. You have an unpopular war in 68, Vietnam, unpopular war now Gaza. You have a new technology upsetting young people, color television. Now it's TikTok. A guy named RFK jumps into the race, 68, RFK Jr. Today. The sitting president quits. LBJ, the sitting president quits Biden. The Democratic convention is in Chicago. It's in Chicago. It's literally beat for beat for beat. The most historic year before was 68. Now it's 2024. The only bad thing is, in 68, Nixon won. And so we've got to break history now if we want for Trump to be defeated. But we are literally beat for beat. The most historic year in news before was 1968. We are doing it beat for beat in 2024.
Yeah, it is amazing to see the historic parallels. I mean, Abby, what are you hearing from people who are kind of wondering if this was going to get to this moment? But I mean, as of Friday night, President Biden was telling advisors privately, I'm not getting out of the race, essentially, so stop asking. Yeah. 24 hours later, as we've now learned from our reporters, he was drafting the letter that they published today.
Yeah, I mean, this was a decision that only he made. And I spoke with someone on Friday who had been in very close touch with his inner circle, who told me that as of that moment, he was not convinced that this was the right strategy. But everybody knows close to the president that only he can make that decision at this moment. And at the end of the day, I think that time was of the essence here. Everyone knew it was not a matter of getting to the convention unless he was planning on staying in. If he was going to get out, he needed to get out right now, like the beginning of this week, in order to give whoever succeeds him, he wanted it to be his vice president, the best chance to consolidate the party. And that is already happening right now. I'm just speaking to several sources who are telling me Vice President Harris is calling around on Capitol Hill. She's calling around to Democratic organizations. She has a list of dozens of calls that she's making today and tonight. The message is what she said in her statement. You've been with us up until this point. I'm asking for your support. Stay with us. But the ball is in motion now. And she's starting, from what I've been told, with two of the biggest constituencies in the Democratic Party, the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. She's made calls to the heads of both of those organizations today. That's, again, I keep having to emphasize this because I think when we talk about voters of color in the Democratic Party, it sounds like, a talking point, but this is a party that is powered by voters of color, by members of color, the DNC, the delegates who will eventually vote to decide who is the nominee. Those people, the most powerful figures in those constituencies are black men, black women, Hispanic men, Hispanic women. She knows that. She is working those lines, and I think she's trying to lock this in. As a source told me, a fundraising source told me, it's 24 to 48 hours. That is what people are looking at. And if she can show a real command of this race, it will be over within just a matter of days.
And Jim Clyburn getting behind her. Yeah. A lengthy statement, and right at the end, he said, I echo what President Biden said to endorse her as the next nominee. What does the next month look like for Vice President Harris, who said in her statement that she's not assuming she's the heir apparent to this nomination, but she said, I'm going to work to earn this nomination.
And that's what working to earn it looks like. You don't say, the president named me and it's me. And because I'm a black woman, you have to give it to me, or you're a racist or a sexist. She's not doing that. She is doing the hard work. She's calling the power centers in this party. She's calling black organizations. She's calling Hispanic organizations. I guarantee you she's also calling donors.
She's definitely calling donors.
Exactly. Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she's doing what needs to be done. And that's the way it's supposed to be. We are a party. We have rules for our rules to create the rules that make the rules. We are a rule-based party, and so she is following the rules.
And that is happening right now. I mean, look, this is a really critical period for the Democratic National Committee. They're having meetings. There's a meeting planned for the end of this week about the rules for the convention. And so this is happening right now. They're going to be putting it in overdrive, trying to establish what that process looks like for the convention with a nominee unsettled. So it's a high wire act right now for the entire party. They are aware of that. But right now, the work in the vice president's office is just moving at a frenzied pace.
And you want to see how smart it is, though. Because there is a process, if you think you've got a better shot, you jump in the water. Kamala Harris, she said, look, the water's warm, jump in. But once you go through the process, then you have to support our nominee. And so we're going to have a process. It's going to be clear and transparent. Everybody's going to understand what it is. And then once we have a nominee, and it looks like it's going to be Kamala Harris, then everybody, you had your moment. If you want to jump in. The water's warm. But once we have a nominee, everybody has to get behind her.
I mean, and what does that look like, though, in the sense of, for 3 weeks, we have seen a major division in the Democratic Party of those who thought Biden should get out and said it A lot of people thought it and didn't say it because they didn't want to. They thought he should make it on his own. And then other people who were firmly behind him. I mean, it is a question of a unified front, what that looks like as we wait to see, does anyone else get in the race?
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone that I have spoken to, there's no question that once the vice president, if she is able to consolidate this quickly and show strength and get the majority of the power centers in the party behind her, there will be an immediate effort to consolidate around her. And everyone that I've talked to believes that this change at the top is going to lead to an injection of an enormous amount of energy that, frankly, Caitlin, has been notably missing for the Democratic ticket. There is a major enthusiasm problem that the party has or had up until this point. They have an opportunity to turn that around. But that being said, I mean, if you are one of the other names that have been floated around as someone who might want to be president someday, the question is, do you really want to take on the sitting vice president of the United States? Do you really want to get into that fight right now? Or do you wait until sometime later? Those people are going to be making those decisions as we speak, and I'm sure we will hear from them in the coming days, but I think people underestimate that that's a very high bar. For someone to decide to do that, everyone knows that's a high bar. Everything is kind of structurally set up well for Vice President Harris to inherit this, but she's got to show overwhelming strength in these next few hours.
Well, and that's an uncertainty for the Trump campaign as well. I spoke to Donald Trump moments after Biden announced this, and he said that he believes he can defeat Harris. I mean, we don't actually know that. There's not really any polling of a real-time scenario here. And also, we don't know that she's going to be the nominee. We're seeing a lot of people line up behind her. But, I mean, this is just a moment of uncertainty for Republicans as it is for Dems.
I feel so sorry for the Republicans. I'm just crying so many tears that they don't know what to do yet. Look.
Think of all the Republicans running against Biden right now. The Senate Republican candidates, they've been using Biden. They're going to have to change tactics.
They're going to have to change tactics. But, you know, the thing about it, if Biden, here's the difference. You had a lot of swing state governors that were sniffing around. And obviously, you got to win Pennsylvania. Maybe it should be Shapiro. You got to win in Michigan. Maybe it should be Gretchen. But that assumed one thing. That assumed that Biden was going to let it leave the door open. Once Biden comes forward and says, look, guys, this is my vice president. This is who I believe in. That makes it a much steeper grade for anybody else. If Biden said, listen, it's up to you guys, maybe somebody jumps in. It's to your point, Abby, she has a whip operation. She has the president's endorsement. To put all that together in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, very, very hard.
Just one quick thing, Caitlin. I mean, I was at the RNC, talked to Trump officials about this. They insist, obviously, that the race doesn't fundamentally change. They think Vice President Harris is fundamentally going to be painted the same way as President Biden. But at the same time, and the truth is, for the Biden campaign, they really had one main plan, which is to win the blue wall. The question is, does a vice presidential pick on Harris's part and her the unique things that she brings to this race, does it close some doors? Does it open others? A lot of people have different views of that, but there is a calculus. It's not just a clear advantage in one direction. There's going to be it's going to be a disadvantage in some areas, an advantage in others, depending on what she decides about a vice presidential pick, and that's going to change the map for sure.
Yeah, safe to say it has fundamentally changed. Wolf, back to you.
All right, Caitlin, thank you. I want to get back to our panel right now. And Audie, let me start with you on this block because as we know, the Democratic convention in Chicago is coming up in a couple of weeks or so. Early voting for the presidential election actually starts in September. So what are the Democrats, what do they need to do to unify the base right now to get everybody working together on behalf of this new ticket?
I think some of it is no alarms, no surprises, making this look like an orderly process. I'm also going to cheat and turn to Karen Finney because I know this woman's phone has been going off. How is this going to work? A mini primary? A genuflect to Nancy Pelosi's office? Like, how is this going to work?
So technically, the Rules Committee can only meet 48 hours after the nominee has dropped out. So 48 hours from now, the Rules Committee, that's the earliest they can meet. They did happen to have a meeting scheduled for Friday. I'm going to say they probably won't make it to Friday. And they will have to decide. I think one of the goals, though, between now and then is to continue to see this strong show of support. I don't know, maybe some of the folks who've also been named as people who might run in an open primary may throw their support behind her and sort of take their names.
You need to go a little bit further.
Out of contention.
What do you know, Finney?
Are we looking at a food fight?
Well, I think most folks have come to recognize, particularly after the last 3 weeks where we have had so much more time talking about Joe Biden than Donald Trump, we would really like to not have that happen and let the convention be an affirmation of our party and an opportunity to thank Joe Biden. And so, again, I think what you're going to continue to see organizations, members of Congress coming out, claiming their support. I mean, I've seen even people who are currently pledged delegates saying, hey, I'm with Joe Biden says that's who I should support. That's who I'm going to support. They'll still have to figure out a process. The delegates are still going to have to vote.
And that's a footnote here, too, because when I talk about it being orderly, yes, there's the money and the messaging. You also want this done, like, airtight legally, because obviously Republicans are waiting to pounce in terms of how is this money transitioned? Who is the next person? How is that voted on? So there are little pockets of vulnerability along the way over the next couple of weeks, and all those things are coming into play.
And Casey, she's got to pick a vice presidential running mate between now and the convention. It's not a lot of time.
There is not a lot of time, and that process, my understanding is that it is already underway, that it had quietly been underway. In fact, for some period of time, I know we had some reporting Friday into Saturday about some of those calls that were going out, because at the bottom line was Kamala Harris had to be incredibly careful about how she handled herself as she was waiting for President Biden to decide what to do. A misstep could have actually really jeopardized her ability to step into this role. And the way that she handled it, there was never any daylight between her and the president. Her team was always very careful to say that whatever they were doing was with the permission of the president, and they really did keep things under lock and key for the most part. It started to kind of push the seams there in the last 72 hours.
It definitely did, but I was just talking to an advisor, and they said really this balancing act.
An advisor to Biden?
An advisor to the Biden-Harris campaign. So this balancing act that she now faces, saying going through the process, but also seizing the reins. So this is something that, as Karen has been saying, it's really been happening as we've been sitting here this afternoon. The calls are going out. She has a long
She's now
call
in
list.
charge.
She is in charge, and she, does not want to be presumptuous. But again, the delegates, the 4,700 delegates, are largely Biden-Harris delegates. I think it's a mistake to think of Kamala Harris back to her presidential campaign. There's a lot of talk about that. A lot of time has changed. Joe Biden barely won the nomination as well in Iowa, New Hampshire. I mean, he struggled. So the reality here is this is an entirely new moment for her. She is a grown candidate. That doesn't mean this is going to be easy for her at all. But the bigger challenges, you can just see the sense of democratic urgency is fueled by, one, her wanting to close off challengers. But even more than that, the unifying factor is going to be Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and others taking shots at her. Time is running out here for her to unify the party. So we shall see. I think any of our productions would have been off a month ago, but it's hard to imagine anyone stepping up in a serious way and challenging her, with the African-American woman being the lifeblood of the party, and she's a historic figure in her own right.
And she also has been the vice president of the United States for the past 3.5 years and gained an enormous amount of experience in that role.
There's no question about that. Something I think she looks forward to talking about on the campaign trail if she is the nominee. I think you also can't miss the fact that over the course of the last 3.5 weeks, despite the fact this has been a total implosion inside the party, the intra-party warfare, Democrats feel like she has comported herself quite well, including folks in the Biden team that maybe at times had gotten crosswise with her, that she really handled the moment and kind of rose to the occasion of the moment through a very difficult period of time. To Jeff's point, I think there's two things in her statement that really kind of stood out to me, which is one, that it was her intention is to earn and win this nomination. That gets at the balancing act that Jeff is talking about there. That's important. And two, the very last line, which is we have 107 days until Election Day. It says together we'll fight and together we'll win. There's 107 days left. There is urgency right now. She will have the balancing act. She will definitely partake in trying to make sure that balancing act works properly and not undercutting any process. But there's 107 days and the stakes could not be higher.
One source said to me, this is speed dating, and it's better if we don't have a lot of people to date. I just was talking to someone who's been working on the convention, and the source said, the message will be the same, the faces will be different. There are a lot of people scrambling to do videos, but Karen, just when we were off during a commercial, we were talking about, and Adi, you said this, these 4 names that are being floated that she might approach or be interested in talking to about being her vice president
Possibly
to bring
be
it
currently vetting.
ticket together. and they were Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, and Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. And one of the two of you made a very funny line about what do they have in common. They're all white men. This is, you do not see.
See, there they are.
There they are. I asked
Varying
for that.
degrees of hair. That's the main difference.
They even made the graphic in the order that was.